Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox.
Today, the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates summoned 3 witnesses from Public Service Procurement Canada, or PSPC, to testify regarding their roles played during the ArriveCan scandal. However, 2 additional witnesses were subsequently added that the committee did not summon. Now, before we get to the video, we want to again thank Ritika Dutt and Amir Moore from Botler AI. We consider ourselves extremely privileged to say that we are speaking and working with them to ensure that Canadians get the facts regarding what really happened here. Please check out their Twitter account, give it a follow so you can see the evidence they drop in real time. They're just such wonderful people, patriotic Canadians, and really, really courageous young individuals. So please show them their support. So without further ado, let's get into this.
As usual, please keep your earpieces away from the microphones as it causes feedback and potential injury. Just a quick update on some documents that have been ordered. Mr. Firth from GC has contacted the committee regarding bank records related to GC, and we are expecting them to arrive today, which of course then will go out to for translation. Now, before we start, I'm going to just do chair's prerogative. It is my wife's birthday, and I know she's watching on. I know she's watching on CPAC, so I want to wish my birthday to you. Okay, my wife Sasha, happy birthday. Being related, of course, with Ogo, I am cheap. This is her birthday gift, and I'll be bringing her a gift wrap. I'll be bringing home a wrapped copy of the supplementary Bs.
A nice bottle of wine for your wife. Come on. You are
Yes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yes.
Before that point of order, just want to thank Jerry Savoy for the 5 gifted memberships to Northern Perspective. Thank you very, very much. So for those of you that were lucky enough to win those memberships, please show Jerry some love.
I believe I might have informally communicated that I would like to see a list of the documents that we have asked for. As I would like a list of the documents we asked for, a list that the dates that those documents were expected, and then whether or not we have received those documents as of yet, just so that we can remain current as to which documents are submitted and which are outstanding.
Yeah. I suspect we'll have an update by the end of the meeting. We're waiting for a bit of information to come in on a couple items. Yeah. Anyways, we'll start with our opening statement. Mr. Mills, welcome back. You have 5 minutes.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, membre du comité.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to describe Public Service and Procurement Canada's role in supporting the Canada Border Services Agency on the ArriveCan network. I'm joined today by 3 members of my team working under our Professional Services Procurement Directorate: Angela Durrigan, Manager; Silvana Mansour, Team Leader; and Anita Chan, Procurement Specialist.
For frontline operational procurement officers to be called to testify in front of parliamentarians. I would like to thank them for joining with me today.
Guys are playing with the audio in the background
and to support the committee's study by providing more insight into procurement and the roles of procurement professionals. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land which we gather today is the traditional, unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. In the earliest days of the pandemic, when the Government of Canada, like all other governments, was working flat out to respond to the pandemic, the procurement professionals at PSPC worked tirelessly to support departments and agencies to source supplies and suppliers in support of their response. To put this in perspective, this was the early days of the pandemic when there were lockdowns across the country, hospitals were operating beyond capacity, people were sick and dying. It was also a time when supply chains broke down, and it was very, very difficult to source supplies and to find service providers. At this time, the Canada Border Services Agency analyzed its internal capacity and did not have the capacity to develop an app with just their staffing resources. As a result, CBSA contacted our department for an urgent requirement for professional services to support the development, integration, maintenance, and an urgent tool to support the implementation of border measures to reduce the risk of importation and transmission of COVID-19.
So a couple things, but before I get to those couple things, we're at 357 viewers, 180 likes. Get that like count up, folks. I know it's easy to get in and just get right into the content, but we need to get those likes up so YouTube starts notifying other people that may not be aware or that may already be aware of our channel so that they can suggest this video to them. That's what the likes do, so please get those up. It actually has little to do whether you like the video or not. So, so please get that. I see them creeping up already. Great job, everybody. Let's get those likes going. Second, notice that this guy's opening statement is all about it was very tough to source things. It was very tough to get things going. Everything was happening really fast. This is called framing, everyone. And framing is usually done in order to pave the way for specific answers that you intend to give later and to essentially get into everybody's heads and make them think, okay, so, there's a reason why things, may not have been perfect, and it was because of the pandemic and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's give them a break. It's very useful in testimony. It's typically why people are given a opening statement, because, they're given an opportunity to say who they are, why they're here, and offer them some chance at honesty. So whether they use that chance to actually be honest or not, that is entirely up to them. This individual was not on the invitation list. And this individual is Michael Mills. He's the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Procurement Branch. No doubt he is here for a reason. The three people that were invited were Angela Durgan, who's the Manager of Professional Services Procurement Directorate, Sylvana Mansour, Supply Team Leader, Professional Services Procurement Directorate, and Anita Chan, Supply Specialist, Professional Services Procurement Directorate. Those were the three people that were actually asked to come. For some reason, Michael Mills and Levent Osmutlu, Director General, Strategy Policy Sector, they showed up. Why could that be? Why could that be? Anyway, keep getting those likes up. We need to get closer to a 1-to-1 ratio on those. As the likes creep up, more people will come in, and you'll see that because YouTube is suggesting the stream out to more and more people. So let's get into it.
This would become the tool that we now know as ArriveCan. CBSA looked at various options to deliver their application, including leveraging internal staff. However, this option was discarded as they did not have the capacity or the technical know-how to develop an app of this complexity with their staff available. To find the IT support that it needed, PSPC helped CBSA access resources under several PSPC-managed professional services methods of supply and put in place new contracts to fulfill their requirements, some of which were issued under emergency contracting authorities. Based on the information received from CBSA today, a total of 46 contracts were used in whole or in part by the CBSA to procure professional services, software licenses, and support to develop and maintain the ArriveCan app. 31 of these contracts were awarded by my department. Out of these 31 contracts, 19 were competitively awarded under pre-established supply arrangements. 8 were to procure software licenses where it was necessary to use sole source contracts due to intellectual property rights or an urgent need. And 4 were sole source contracts for IT consulting services due to the pressing emergency.
So I have a feeling they're going to be using a lot of procurement terms tonight. So, sole source contract, for those that don't know. Sole source contract is something that an agency engages in when they are looking to purchase a specific piece of software from a specific vendor. So this is often done so they can avoid a competition. There is not necessarily anything malicious or corrupt about it, as long as the agency is providing justification, written justification as to why they're engaging in a sole source contract. Now, You're not typically engaging in a sole source contract when you're talking something that's $1 million. This is something that's usually in the tens of thousands of dollars. And all of this you can find on the publicly available PSPC procurement policies for the Government of Canada. So a sole source contract is something where, let's say you need to buy Microsoft Office and you're only going to be using it through a company called SoftChoice or Insight or any of these guys. You can say, well, I need to, spend over $25,000 and I'm only going to purchase from here, but there's a really good reason as to why I'm only buying from that vendor, and this is the reason. So it allows you to skip the competition portion of the contracting process.
I just want to address a very quick question from Chicken Lady. Are you allowed to not show up if you were summoned? So first you get invited to committee, and then if you don't show up, then they summon you. And I do not believe that you can refuse a summons. I don't know what the penalty is. There may be jail time involved. I'm not 100% sure. Do you know?
You're held in contempt of committee. And yes, they can take some legal action against you, but it's very similar to a subpoena. You have to show up. The only reason why you wouldn't show up or can't show up is for documented medical reasons, like if you're in the hospital, or, one way to avoid it is if you're out of the country, then you can actually receive the summons in the first place.
And I see that we have 351 likes and 477 watching. We're about 120 behind. Please, please, please hit that like button for us. It helps push the stream out to Canadians who need to see what's going on in our government.
Great to see Humble Tracker in the chat, even if it's for a little bit. Hope you have a safe trip home whenever you're finished overseas, Humble Tracker. Take care of yourself out there. Now when it comes to, someone asked, can these guys just show up? How can they just show up? So they didn't just show up today, but they inserted themselves into the guest list or the invitee list, and there's going to be some unhappy people around the table about that. I've seen the first couple of minutes of this, so I know what happens immediately, but not too much after that.
Well, and I know just from reading ourcommons.ca that you can request to go and observe committee, as long as it's one that's open to the public. You can go and watch. You can also request to testify at committee if it's something that would be relevant. Like, for example, if you're a geologist and they're doing a study on geology, you can volunteer and give your information. I don't believe that this gentleman went either of those routes.
Right. Technically, GC Strategy stands for Government of Canada Strategies as far as I'm concerned. At least that's what it should stand for. Now, the big problem with this guy showing up is that he's the one speaking right now. He's the one levying the opening statement. And he shouldn't be doing that because he wasn't initially summoned. So this is not going to go down well for Mr. Michael Mills today.
To be clear, the government contracting regulations and the associated policy framework allow PSPC and departments to enter sole source contracts when there's a pressing emergency. The pandemic was such an emergency. Further, in order to support the execution of an effective and rapid government response to COVID-19 global pandemic, TBS approved time-limited increases to those emergency contracting authority limits. For 23 contracts, the work was authorized as and when requested through task authorizations. Most of these task-based contracts were put in place using the government's pre-existing methods of supply. Ces arrangements permettent au Canada de solliciter des
These arrangements allow Canada to solicit proposals from a pool of pre-qualified suppliers based on a list of predefined criteria and to take advantage of pre-established contract terms and conditions.
Efficiency to the procurement process, provide clients faster services with less collective administrative costs. By design, they provide a framework for client departments to put in place their own contracts and task authorizations much easier and to administer their own contracts. Under these arrangements, client departments develop statements of work, evaluation criteria for the selection process. If the contract value is under $3.75 million, the department can serve as the contracting authority, run the procurement themselves, and process to put in place the contract. If it is over $3.75 million, PSPC administers selection and contract award. In both cases, it is the client department that evaluates technical proposals, conducts verifications of certifications. PSPC, as contracting authority, undertakes the financial assessment and applies the evaluation criteria to recommend a winner. We all verify company and individual security clearances at the time of award. We also award the contract once approved by the client department.
So just one question. We're not going to make a habit of this tonight, but it is a question that comes up a lot when it comes to ArriveCan. So Faith and Hope is asking, did I miss anywhere that it was mentioned that they started this in 2019? Did they know that they would use this for the pandemic? Okay, so one of the incorrect and false theories that is floating around out there is that they knew about the pandemic because they were building ArriveCan in 2019. So that's incorrect. What ended up happening was in 2019, they started looking at building a app that would allow people to check in and avoid customs forms and stuff like that. So that was the app that they actually started with. And given that they started working with the infrastructure and the build of that particular app when the pandemic happened, it was changed. Like the whole scope of that project was changed over to this ArriveCan, vaccine certification and check-in app. So that's the facts of actually what happened. So that change happened, obviously sometime in, I think it was the spring or early summer of 2020 when that work started. So just to make sure that everybody's clear on that.
These contracts allowed CBSA to move quickly to bring in the resources they need with the specific technical skills at the different points in the development of the app. Once the contract is in place, it's administered in a shared responsibility between PSPC.
Sorry, Mr. Mills, you're at your 5 minutes. Can you wrap up briefly?
Yep, I will wrap up very quickly. Sorry. I would just like to conclude by noting that IT contracting is a very important area also for the support of small businesses in Canada, in particular Indigenous businesses. At this committee, you heard from Dalian, who is an Indigenous business. Under the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, federal departments and agencies can set aside contracts where there is known capacity amongst Indigenous businesses. Dalian was such a business. What is important to understand is under the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, 33% of contracted or subcontracted resources must be Indigenous, not for a particular task authorization, but for the overall value of the contract. Therefore, Indigenous businesses can subcontract with non-Indigenous businesses. Again, I'd like to thank the committee for having the opportunity to be here, and we're happy to take your questions.
Okay. How dare you? How dare you invoke this policy to virtue signal around Dalian? Dalian has 2 employees. 2 employees. Technically 3, because there's the president that, sits there. So I guess that's that 30%, everyone. Wow, that 33%. The president is Indigenous and he's the 33%. Wow, there you go. But Dalian never does any work. So you need to revisit that policy, sir, and see how many contracts were awarded to Dalian based on that Indigenous procurement policy, and understand that virtually all of the projects that they're subcontracting to, guaranteed, none of them are Indigenous. Wow. Okay, this is going to be a ride, everybody.
We want to say thank you to Pink Emo Slayer for gifting 10 Northern Perspective memberships. If you've received a membership, please show Pink Emo Slayer some love.
Thanks, Mr. Mills. Ms. Kusi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Mills, you started off by saying that it is extraordinary that you would generally have, if I may say, the middle managers, not the top officials. Yeah, that absolutely is extraordinary. But what's also extraordinary is that Canadians paid $54 million for the ArriveCan app. What's even more extraordinary than that is the RCMP investigation we have now, which has allegations of forged resumes, identity theft, collusion, and fraudulent contracting. So, I mean, that's really extraordinary. What's also extraordinary, Mr. Mills, is that this government has a history, actually, of not listening to women, for letting the men speak for women. You can talk to Jane Philpotts if you want to about that. You could talk to Jody Rayson-Wilbode about that. You could also talk to Selena Sajar-Chavez. And finally, I'll say, Mr. Mills,
Wow.
we originally invited these 3 women, understanding that they would be perfectly capable of responding for themselves. And if you don't mind me saying so, this committee actually has a history, unfortunately, of senior executives within the government not necessarily telling us the truth in this committee.
Wow. Good for her.
Go, Stephanie.
Awesome.
I love this. And this is off the cuff, by the way, everybody. Obviously, she's just responding to his statement.
Yeah, because she wasn't expecting him to even be there.
Right? So good on her. And this is what I'm really applauding the Conservatives lately. Like, they are just, there is no tolerance anymore for the lies. There's no tolerance. They are calling everything out immediately as they see it. And as they should. Because this is just one scandal after another. And this guy thinks, well, it's extraordinary. You're going to invite these peons here, and you're not going to invite the big people that know what they're talking about like me. Well, because we can't trust you. How many assistant deputy ministers, and that's what he is, have come in here and lied through their teeth straight to the committee? So the strategy here is screw the assistant deputy minister. We want to actually hear the people that do the work. And the problem is now that he's here, it's even less likely that these people are going to tell the truth because their boss is here now.
Well, I think Frank, with a $5 super chat, summed it up very succinctly. What a weasel. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think it's a result of their political masters, but that's certainly a deeper conversation. So with all of that, Mr. Mills, I do believe...
Je pense, compte tenu de tout cela,
Oh, somebody pressed the wrong button.
Yes, I did see this while I was searching for images for the thumbnail, and it goes on for maybe about 2 minutes, but then they do reset Stephanie's time.
That's such... Oh,
Sorry, one moment, please.
Thank you.
Translation.
And some of you thought the Northern Perspective audio guy was bad. This is nothing.
Yeah, this guy definitely needs to go to
again in translation?
Mendocino Island.
okay, ça fonctionne now? That works right now?
F off translator.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
it is now working.
Mr. Chair, can Ms. Kuzi just go back like 30 seconds?
This reminds
I
me of
think
the
we're just
Jaws
getting-
movie. The shark is working. The shark is
We
not
will
working.
once we get it working.
And don't forget to get those
interpretation
likes
is
up,
not
everybody.
working.
We're 150 odd behind. Get the likes in so that YouTube can suggest this video to more and more people.
And also, don't forget to check out Botler
saying right
AI's
now.
Twitter. It's linked at the top of the chat in that blue bar.
It is now working, Mr. Chairman.
Kathy,
You try
guessing
and
to your
tur-
question,
It is now working.
we don't have that
Checking the
offhand,
Checking the English channel.
mainly because that's
checking
a different
the
topic for
English
tonight,
channel.
but it's something that we can probably get our hands on.
Checking the English channel.
We're fine now? Okay, thanks.
Tell me this is a government operation.
You're at minute 30, and if Mr. Johns asks you, just move back about 30 seconds. I'll make sure the time is reset. Go ahead.
Okay, so, pardon me, so that leaves me with 4 minutes and 30 seconds? Okay, thank you so much. So, Mr. Johns, what I was saying, what I was trying to explain to the two witnesses that we originally had not invited was that unfortunately, Mr. Johns,
That's a
as you
backhand
well
comment.
know, we have a history in this committee of senior government executives not being forthright with us, not necessarily telling us the truth. I guess in this room I can say, frankly, lying to us, as was evidenced by the
Yeah, you don't have Greg
story
to tell you that's
recently
unparliamentary.
in the Globe and Mail from Bill Curry. So you will forgive us then, please, if we direct our questions to the three other individuals, Ms. Durgan, Ms. Chan, and Ms. Mansour here today, and I'll start now. Ms. Chan, why did you determine Botler's contract to be between Botler and the subcontractor?
That will start off with an investigation on our part once we receive the first complaint from Ms. Studd alleging that her name as well as the name of Mr. Moravev were used in a TA without their consent, and work was being conducted, and the work was paid to the contractor on file on the contract, which is Dalian and Corotics in joint venture. So from when we inquire further with the representative of Corotics, they informed us that in fact, both resources were provided the
You're
sorry.
doing great. Keep going. Thank you.
The work provided from the resources were provided from a third party, which was GC Strategies. From our perspective, because Dalian and Corotics did comply with what we asked for, there was nothing that was determined out of the ordinary from our audit. They did not actually breach any contract or any terms to the contract. From then on, it's a dispute between the resources, GC Strategies, and the contractor. And Canada has no purview in this dispute.
Okay.
She's very nervous.
Well, she's extremely nervous, times two. Somebody had it right. She's nervous because her boss is sitting right there. And the other reason why she's nervous is she is a supply specialist. She's a low-tier employee within the government procurement department. She never in her wildest dreams ever thought she would ever be sitting at committee answering questions from a bunch of elected officials. Never thought that in a million years. And here she is. And she's hoping she doesn't say the wrong thing. One, from a legal perspective, and two, from an operational perspective, because her boss is, or her boss's boss's boss is sitting over there. Right? So, you know, she probably reports into Durgan. Durgan probably reports into the other individual sitting there, which is Levent Osmutlu or Osmutlu. I'm probably butchering that last name. And Osmutlu probably reports into Michael Mills. So that's quite intimidating for a employee to be sitting there. And this is exactly why they didn't invite anybody above her. Yet here they are. So, second, what she's essentially trying to explain there is that because the prime contract was with Dalian, they're saying they didn't really have any evidence that Dalian did anything untoward in terms of the government policies. So if there's anything related to this false identity or false resumes or anything like that, she's saying that's a dispute between Botler and Dalian. But the problem with this whole thing is that Botler didn't even know Dalian was doing any of this stuff. Right? And Botler was named on the task authorization from the government. Now that had to originate from the government. Right? That didn't originate from Dalian. That originated from CBSA and the government, which went through PSPC because they handle the contracting process. So that doesn't wash. And the other thing to consider here is that Botler didn't give consent to that. So how are you naming somebody on a task authorization without their consent, using their identities and information without their consent, and signing them up to a contract negotiated on their behalf, and they're not even involved in it? They have no idea this is even happening. This is where all this is a problem. So this business about, well, you know, that's a dispute between Botler and Dalian. No, I don't think so. And a court of law would not think so either.
Okay, I do disagree with that. I do believe that the information that I have here states that in any subcontract, other than a subcontract referred to in paragraph 2A, the contractor must, unless the contracting authority agrees in writing, ensure that the subcontractor is bound by conditions compatible with and in the opinion of the contracting authority not less favorable to Canada than the conditions of the contract, with the exception of the requirements under the Federal Contractors Program for Employment Equity, which only apply to the contractor. So the information that I have here doesn't necessarily corroborate with that. But Ms. Manser, what made you confirm with Ms. Chan that the issue was between the contractor and the resources?
So what Stephanie did just there is she was referring to a government procurement policy that essentially says, no, the buck doesn't stop with the prime contractor according to your own policies, Ms. Chan. Your policy states that if the prime contractor is subcontracting to somebody else, then PSPC has an obligation to ensure that that subcontractor of the prime contractor is essentially on the same level and operating with no incorrect or untoward motives or actions towards the government of Canada. That's basically what she's saying. To distill that down, it doesn't matter if Dalian subcontracted to GC Strategies, to Toys R Us, to Tim Hortons. It doesn't matter. The whole chain has to have a level of integrity that's maintained, and that's the responsibility of the government of Canada. That's basically what she's saying. And Barnaby from Northern Perspectives in chat. All right.
Thank you, Barnaby, for joining us. And we also have 685 watching and 542 likes. Please hit the like button. It helps push the stream out to other Canadians who need to see this.
Our contract is with Coradix and Dalian. Those two resources came to light as Coradix had subcontracting to GC Strategies, and GC Strategies proposed them as resources. So we have no stand to interfere in subcontracting because it's not the prime contractor with whom we have the contract.
That's an interesting assessment of that, Ms. Mansour. So what she's saying is that the contract was given to Dalian, and Dalian chose GC Strategies as the subcontractor. Remember what Cam, our friend Cameron McDonald, remember he said that GC Strategies and Botler sought him out. So how could Dalian select GC Strategies as the subcontractor when GC Strategies and Botler allegedly sought Cameron out? How's that possible? And the answer is that it's not. What you're going to argue that GC Strategies and Botler went to Cameron and said, hey, Cameron, we have this solution we'd like to propose to you. And Cameron said, oh, okay, sure, let's do that. Let's draw up a contract with Public Service Procurement Canada. And then they said, oh, okay, who's going to win the contract? Well, we have a task authorization that we can give to Dalian. Okay, we're going to give that to Dalian. Dalian said, I know who could do this, GC Strategies. Come on. I don't think so.
Fergus McLeod says, stop telling me to hit a button, earn it. Well, Fergus, the like button helps push this stream out to Canadians who need to see it. So it does help other Canadians. And I will stop bugging you guys so much when those numbers match.
There you go.
Yeah, you certainly always have standing when you're dealing with taxpayer money. Ms. Chan, what was your understanding of the situation when you wrote Ms. Julie Prudhomme of Coradix about TA number 2021002043?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Are you asking me from my understanding?
As to what was going on when you wrote with just the uncertainty of this situation?
Okay, please keep in mind that the only information that was brought on to PSPC was the email, was a complaint from Ms. Stutt. So the email states that her name, as well as Mr. Moravev, were used without consent or knowledge to this particular TA. Obviously, we want to investigate this because their claim is frankly quite severe.
That is our time.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr.
Thank you.
Baines?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today.
There's the mute button.
You muted yourself, Mr. Baines.
Sorry. Your cooperation here is, greatly appreciated. After several meetings, we're still trying to unpack and piece together like what's taken place here. So what I've learned here, what we as a committee have learned, my understanding, ArriveCan isn't under investigation, but allegations from Botler about a tender to build a sexual harassment app is now being reviewed.
It's not a sexual harassment app.
$55 million cost of ArriveCan.
What is wrong with you?
70 updates reflects development, updates the information security, data management, cloud services.
I'm sorry, I have to stop it there. This guy he said Botler was building a sexual harassment app.
Well, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that the app was built to identify harassment and or sexual harassment in the workplace. But like sorry, I lost my train of thought. It didn't turn like into ArriveCan or anything like that. So like, I don't know.
No, but it just when he calls it a sexual harassment app, it implies that it goes out and sexually harasses people, and it's a very, very poor and frankly disgusting mischaracterization of what Botler has been trying to build. So I would say it's an anti-sexual harassment app, if you're going to call it anything.
Yeah, that's a better way to phrase it.
Yeah. So anyway.
We do have a couple super chats. We have Glenn Stewart with a $5 super chat. It seems that the bosses are still protecting their own butts. Yep, seems that way. And then we have... Sorry.
Robert Ortlet with a $2 super chat. You both are a breath of fresh air in the now time. Thank you so much for that.
But it also saves $3 per traveler when compared to the old paper system. So we sort of learned that it was actually, cheaper, and it was done in record time under the circumstances. And Botler's principal issue here is a contractual between themselves and Cordix and Dalian. Botler Inc. was to conduct a 6-month proof of concept for their software at the CBSA with the potential for broader government use. Payment issues arose. Botler claims to have received only 2 installments totaling $112,000 of the promised $336,000 for their software configuration work. So numerous allegations of individuals misleading this committee, from public servants to Botlers themselves. Like, this is sort of where we're at right now. And my first question is to Mr. Mills. At the heart of this situation, the dispute between a subcontractor and a federal government supplier that began with claims of non-payment. How often would you say PSPC hears from subcontractors in a similar situation or dispute with contract holder? Is this common, rare? What can you expand on this?
Before Mr. Mills gets to expand on that, I just want to give my take on that. So this is getting extremely tiresome at this point, and I'm sure all of you are tired of this. All you hear is these liberals trying to disconnect this from ArriveCan. And you say, oh, well, yeah, it has nothing to do with ArriveCan, nothing to do with ArriveCan. And also, they're saying, well, this may have cost $54 million, but this saves $3 a person on a piece of paper, so overall it made it a lot cheaper. That doesn't justify an over expenditure of tens of millions of taxpayer dollars. So it doesn't matter if the savings is 99% here, because the app and the solution should have cost tens of millions of dollars less. You cannot run away from that. I'm sorry, but you can't. You can try, but you just look like an ill-informed, corrupt political fool when you do that.
Ryan Paplinski says it right. with a 279 super chat, people making over $100,000 a year who know nothing. Yep.
That's a lot of government people.
That sums it up. Yeah.
And go ahead.
We also have 5 gifted memberships from Humble Tracker. If you have received a gifted membership, please thank Humble Tracker.
Humble Tracker says, "Wow, that took forever." Well, I guess the gerbils. Maybe the government is running YouTube tonight. I don't know. That's why it's so slow. Anyhow, the other thing that I find interesting is this question to Mr. Mills. They have shamefully, not hidden the reason why Mr. Mills and his Director General are here today, and it appears that they want to just get it out of the way and show everybody with the first question, because this feels like such a softball question, and it looks like they've brought Mr. Mills in as a quote-unquote fixer to try to deal with this situation, shield the 3 people that are actually supposed to be answering questions, and allow them to get out of this without too much damage. So that's what seems like is happening here.
And we've got 726 watching and 618 thumbs up. Please give us a thumbs up and help push out the stream to other Canadians.
We're keeping you informed, everybody.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the questions. We do about 10,000 contractual measures a year. And many of those contracts involve subcontracts. So I would say that unfortunately, it is common in certain cases that there will be disputes between prime contractors and subcontractors about payment. This is part of the reason why our department has been very active in spearheading efforts for prompt payment requirements so that we can ensure that prime contractors pay their subcontractors in a timely fashion after the Government of Canada has paid out claims. I would say...
If this is common, what's different here in this situation?
So they're trying to normalize this, okay? That's what I'm getting from this. They're trying to normalize the situation. Oh, well, this is nothing new. We deal with this all the time. There's nothing special here, nothing to see here. Why are we even talking about this? Because this is a normal thing, and we have processes to deal with this. That's what this sounds like right here. Again, softball questions.
And we have a $2 super chat from Office Girl. Thank you. Thanks for your tireless and patient coverage.
Thank you very much for that. It is exhausting sometimes.
I'm not sure I can answer what's necessarily
No, if that's common, there are disputes, but like, why is this situation come to the forefront in this manner?
I would argue, Mr. Chair, that this has come through because of the allegation that there was misappropriate use of their subcontractors' resumes and credentials in terms of obtaining the work. But in terms of, from a contracting perspective, in our understanding, this was a task authorization that was issued to a company that had a task-based contract. It was issued as a piece of IT work within that task-based the task-based contract was for IT work. So it was a task authorization that was fairly general. It said they were going to do feasibility work in the IT space under an IT contract. And with that task authorization, it didn't name who the resources were, and it did not name Botler. It was only after they made the allegation that their resumes were used and put forward by GC Strategies that it came to light that there was these issues.
And then what's PSPC's role in a dispute like this then?
So maybe I would turn to Angela or someone to explain what we would normally do when the dispute comes in.
So with respect to this dispute?
Correct.
So in cases where we would seek subject matter experts, and in this particular instance, we sought legal, we consulted with justice, and from there we made a determination on how we would proceed. And again, in this instance, as directed by Ms. Chan, we found, based on information that was provided to us by both Caradix and Dalian in joint venture, as well as CBSA, that we took that information and determined that it was a dispute between the subcontractor and in this case, a subcontractor. And again,
and then does government intervene, like, for example, ever pay a company subcontractor directly, even if there's isn't any contractual relationship with that company?
So we did not under this circumstance have a contractual obligation or a contractual situation with Botler, nor did we have one with GC Strategies. Our contract is with Dalian and Caradix in joint venture. With respect to that, we advised Botler as such. With respect to payment and the TA itself, CBSA determined that only 2 of the deliverables were accepted, and they provided payment to those 2 deliverables through Dalian and Caradix. Thereafter, it is our understanding that the TA was amended to close out with only those 2 deliverables having been completed.
Okay, so would you say PC's standpoint, from your standpoint, the standard procedures were followed in this particular dispute?
Yes.
Great. That is our time. Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mrs. Vignola for 6, please.
Just because you have standard procedures doesn't mean your standard procedures are any good. Like, that's the problem with government. One thing that government seems to have a problem accepting is that there is a stereotype about them, and it's because the stereotype is actually true. You know, there's a saying with government projects, you know, why build something at, full price when you can charge double and not deliver the project by half? Like, it's just any vendor that gets involved with the government, they're licking their chops because they know they have a payday, because they can charge whatever the heck they want.
Yeah, you charge $54 million for an app that doesn't even work.
Right. And you can subcontract out, 3 levels deep and no one's going to bat an eye. And it's amazing because you hear these people that work for procurement. They're sitting right there. And you're listening to them to describe this, and it sounds stupid coming out of their mouths. It sounds ridiculous. And you think, like, does this not sound ridiculous to you? You're the one saying it. This sounds absolutely stupid.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the past few weeks, an anomaly was brought to the attention of the public and the committee regarding a contract by Caradix and Dalian that also involves Botler and GC Strategies. This all happened roughly at the same time as GCS, Dalian and Caradix were working on ArriveCan. So my first question to Ms. Chan. When these 3 companies were working for ArriveCan, were any subcontractors not paid within the time they should have been? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman.
You're asking me for if I have received personally any complaints from subcontractors on the list, on the TAs for the contracts that I have on my file that I have visibility on during the course of any work that was performed on ArriveCan. Is this correct?
Oui.
Not to my knowledge. The Botler TA would be the first instance.
Botler, là, je parle pas de...
I'm not talking about the Botler TA, but I'm talking about GC Strategies, Dalian, and Caradix in relation to ArriveCan. Were any subcontractors of those 3 companies in touch with you or with members of your team to say, this isn't working, I'm not getting paid? Personally?
In this case, but I do not have visibility on all the contracts that have been issued for the work of ArriveCan.
Est-ce qu'il est possible de vérifier auprès des gens qui...
Would it be possible to check with people who were managing contracts associated with ArriveCan? Could you see if they received complaints about subcontractors not getting paid? Mr. Mills?
Mr. President, we would be happy to undertake with CBSA's Chief Financial Officer, who's responsible for paying invoices, to see if they've had complaints of non-payment from subcontractors.
Okay, a couple things.
We have a $20 super chat from Light Giver. Thank you very much. Years ago, I was a network engineer with Bell Canada. I had to create a budget and get approval for the dollars breaking down all costs prior to starting a job. The government should work the same. Absolutely. Because, again, the government doesn't have its own money. The government has taxpayer money, which is taken from all of us. So it should be breaking down all costs and making sure that it's getting the best deal that it can, because this is our money it's using.
Yeah, and just a note, because I've seen the comment a couple times in the chat. If we have an election and the Conservatives get in power and the Conservatives don't start addressing this and they start reneging on their promises, you better bet that we're going to be having episodes and live streams calling out the Conservatives as well, because as most of our members know, we don't align to a party, we align to a platform. And that platform has to be rooted in the best interest of Canadians. And so far, that's where the Conservatives are standing. The Liberals, they try to state that, but their actions speak louder than their mouths ever could. So that's on that. Another couple of things. For those of you that may not be familiar because you haven't been on some of the other streams, or maybe you haven't seen some of our other videos, they keep talking about a task authorization or a TA. What that is activating a general services contract that has already been done. So sometimes what happens, even in the private sector, is they will contract an organization for a block of hours, basically effort. It's almost like a retainer, right? So organizations have lawyers on retainers. They pay them so many thousands of dollars per year, and that guarantees them a block of hours whenever they need it. That's kind of what this is. And a task authorization is a process within the government where you say, okay, I need to activate some of that contract that I've already paid for, and here's what I need it for, and this is the amount. And you don't have to go through a procurement process, you don't have to go through a competition, because you're already activating a contract with a vendor. So the problem with this is this allows a lot of really sketchy projects to actually get off the ground, because you don't have to do an RFP, a request for purchase, or a request for a proposal, sorry. So there's no competition from organizations, and they just spend money on these contracts like it's going out of style. So it's a big problem. And lastly, something unrelated to this, but you'll probably notice as soon as I point this out. If you notice in any of the committee hearings that you've seen, in the House of Commons, any parliamentary type of proceeding, there are virtually zero Conservatives that are remote. It's very rare. Sometimes happens, but it's extremely rare. And virtually everybody that is remote is either NDP or Liberal. So why is that? Well, it's because the Conservatives actually have a party policy that we work for Canadians, so we better show up to work in person. We need to be showing our constituents back home that we are working for them in Ottawa. We don't want to be showing them that we're lazy and that we're taking advantage of the situation. We will sit in the room and we will be there. And there are allowances for not going in there, like if you have a funeral or if you have a serious medical situation, you have a baby coming, that sort of thing. So they're taking the representation and the optics of what they do extremely seriously. They know it's a privilege to be an MP, and they're trying to demonstrate that they're not taking advantage of that. So take a look at that as you look around this committee, you watch other committee videos, even on other channels. Take a look at how many Liberals are remote and NDP people are remote versus the Conservatives. Anyway, let's keep going.
Merci. Monsieur Mills is...
Thank you. Mr. Mills, do officials in charge of communications between these companies, have they had to intervene to make sure that these companies actually paid their subcontractors?
Mr. President, it's not our normal process to verify with subcontractors after payments have been made out whether primes have paid their subs.
Merci.
Thank you. Legal and professional records and security ratings for subcontractors were the conditions, were the fact that the subcontractors supposedly met conditions like security ratings verified for subcontractors?
To the best of my knowledge, the security requirements for subcontractors were verified by CBSA.
Avez-vous reçu des signaux d'alerte?
Did you receive any alerts from officials who felt it would be necessary to review the statement of work and the procurement process because they comprised irregularities that made them uncomfortable about ArriveCan contracts when it came to GCS, Dalian, and Corridix?
Mr. Chair, I did not receive any complaints personally about anyone having concerns with the statements of work with respect to those contracts. I don't know if anyone else amongst our team received any complaints.
Avez-vous vérifié qu'aucun curriculum?
Have you checked that no CVs were altered to meet the requirements for the task authorizations by Corridix, GS Strategies, or Dalian?
Mr. President, when the contracts or task authorizations are let, it is actually the responsibility of the department, the technical authority, CBSA, to verify that the resources put forward have the credentials required to carry out the work. So in terms of reviewing the resumes and the qualifications of the subcontractors and their resources, that work would have been conducted by CBSA. You would have to ask them in terms of what work they've done to validate and review.
Au niveau des livrables et des étapes de livraison.
Regarding deliverables and steps in delivery, were you assured that they respected and complied with the general procurement processes for Corridix, GS Strategies, and Dalian?
We're talking about the division of responsibility with respect to contracts, and it is the responsibility of the contracting department, CBSA, to verify the receipt of deliverables and to make the payments based on their receipt and acceptance of deliverables under contracts.
So this is always frustrating to hear them talk about this stuff. You hear CBSA say, "Oh, everything is in the court of PSPC," and then PSPC is saying, "No, everything is in the court of CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency." So it's always rich when they do that. Now, the one thing that he did say is accurate is that yes, it is the agency's responsibility to sign off that they received the service that they contracted for. So that is correct. But I love that he's saying, "Oh, well, it's also not our job to vet the technical requirements. It's not our job to look at the resumes. It's not our job to do any of that. But it is our job to issue the contract and sign it off." It's the most ridiculous process I think I've ever heard of. Because the agency actually never gets involved in the money. Like, there's no negotiation that the agency gets to participate in. PSPC does that. It's ridiculous. So no wonder everything is always inflated. The last thing I want to mention is, and we're going to be mentioning this probably frequently on most of our videos going forward, is despite the fact that Botler has been supplying us with evidence, which we really appreciate them for, so we can get a really distilled view of what is going on. We want to repeatedly say that there's no opinions that Botler is actually providing us that we are relaying. All the opinions on the evidence that they provide and the opinions of anything that we're seeing is entirely of Northern perspective. This is to ensure that everybody has a clear understanding that Botler is not providing opinions, they're just providing facts. The only opinions they're providing are what they put out themselves on social media and at committee and their own testimony. So I just wanted to make that completely clear for everybody. You probably were, but there's reasons that we need to do that.
And thank you to Ryan Peplinsky with a $2.79 super chat. I don't know anyone who talks like these people. Yeah, they're really dancing around their words, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Well, look at the expression on this guy's face. He's probably regretting that he showed up today.
est-ce qu'il est habituel de voir qu'une
Is it usual for a recruitment company to hire another recruitment company to hire resources for a given contract?
Good question.
I would, Mr. President, I don't know if it's typical to have multiple layers of recruitment companies, but I will say that in very complex IT projects, it is typical that there will be a number of subcontractors. Many of those subcontractors will actually be individuals. Those individuals will be incorporated individually, so it may look like there are layers of subcontracts when it's actually the subcontracting entity is actually an individual in that contract as a corporation.
No, but I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Sorry. That's ridiculous. That is not normal. Okay? It is not normal. It may be normal for the government, but it's not normal in the real world. What's normal in the real world, if you're talking IT, if you're talking facilities, if you're talking finance, if you're talking any of this stuff, what's normal is that if you need work done that the organization can't do itself, then what they're going to do is they're going to find something called a partner. And a partner has the skill set to actually do that. Okay? The only difference is if you're looking for a specific professional. But even then, what you're going to do is you're going to contract somebody to do that. Or you're going to go to a staffing firm and you're going to say, go and find me somebody that has these qualifications. And they're going to go and do that. And then they go and get that person and give them to you. And then you invoice the staffing agency. And then they pay the employee. Or you say, here's your finder's fee staffing agency, go away. And then you're going to deal directly with the employee. But what's most common is you're going to go out and you're going to find a partner, a firm. So what should have probably happened is they needed to build an app and they didn't know how to build apps. There are so many mobile app firms out there that they could have contacted to bring in that would have had the expertise to build this and build it quickly. They didn't need to go through 2 or 3 levels of subcontracting to get the skill set they actually needed. So that's a bunch of BS. Makes me start wondering about this guy now.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Thank you, Ms. Vignola. Mr. Johns, please.
Well, before I jump into my questioning, I want to ask you, Mr. Mills, is it typical, and what is the threshold of commissions on contracts? So you've got a contractor who can take 15 to 30% commission. They can subcontract down to a subcontractor. They can take 15 to 30%. What is the limit on how far down the line it can go and how much can the commissions actually be? Total. What is the absolute total? All the it goes contractors, subcontractors. How much commission can be paid out?
Mr. President, I think to begin, I would note that most of these instruments and the TBIPs is a competitive instrument. So when we put out a requirement, it is actually a requirement to compete that amongst many firms. It is typical that we have many respondents and that a lot of the selection and the winning is based on the price of each of the resources at the different levels. So you may have a requirement that says we need a web developer, we need a security specialist, we need senior.
I'm just looking for an answer. I'm actually looking for an answer. Is there a set amount, maximum allowed to be paid in commissions through this chain of contractors, subcontractors, ghost contractors, and everybody taking a cut? Is there a max cut that can be taken? That's all I'm asking.
That's actually a really good question.
Is there any regs in there to make sure that there's a set amount that can only be paid out, like maximum on a project?
There is not a set of regulations that bars it, but what I would say is that these contracts are awarded under competition, where it's the market rates that are prevailing that are limiting how much firms can ultimately charge.
You're a knob.
Did we not hear on Tuesday that there was no competition because Deloitte was like put in the penalty box, so it went to GC Strategies?
For ArriveCan, yeah.
Yeah, for competition, though.
So there was none.
Yeah, so he's saying, oh, there's competition, so it's market rates. But we just heard the other day that there's no competition.
Right. But there also was no competition when it came to Botler and Dalian. Because what they did is they just went to Dalian and they said, hey, so we already have a contract, so it doesn't matter. So we're just going to issue a task authorization, pull some money out of that. and that's going to go to Botler. Sorry, that's going to go to GC Strategies, and then that's going to go to Botler. Now, this was a really, really good question because it brings up a very good point that this genius here needs to go back to his department and take action on immediately and go to his minister and say, hey, this is a really good thing that we should consider. Let's put that in today. So the question was, let's say you have a $100,000 contract, nice round number. Dalian is assigned that contract. So $100,000 goes over to them. And they take a 30% cut off the top. So now there's only $70,000 left. They have $70,000 to spread out in order to get this contract done, whatever it is. They subcontract that out to GC Strategies. GC Strategies takes 30%. So now they're taking $30,000 more because they're probably taking it off the main contract. So now we're down to $40,000. Now, GC Strategy says, okay, well, now I have to find some poor guy or poor girl to do the work for $40,000. Oh, we can't do that? Okay, Dalian, we need to go back and ask for more money because there's nobody that's going to work for $40,000. Never mind the fact that they've already taken $30,000. So then they inflate the price if they can actually get more money out of the government, and then they take an additional percentage off of that. So this is what Mr. Johns, NDP guy, is actually asking. And it's a very good question. So it shows me the NDP is engaged. Mr. Johns has actually consistently, over the last 3 hearings, asked some very good questions. He's not throwing softballs their way. He's actually asking accountability questions because the NDP guaranteed they are starting to distance themselves from this Liberal government. We started saying that in some of the earlier hearings. We saw that again with the carbon tax vote. And we're continuing to see this. So it's a very, very good question. So what this guy should be doing is going back to his minister and saying, hey, we need a new policy and a new law that says on any contract that is issued by the government of Canada, there's a max commission payout of 30%. That's even ridiculous. It should be 20%. But if you want to get greedy, sure, 30%. That way, when a contract gets out, it's up to that main prime contractor. If they want to subcontract it anymore, and they take 30% off the top, nobody else gets a cut of it. That's what should be happening. Well, let's be real. What should be happening is the government should be hiring people that find talent themselves. That way there is no cut that is paid to any of these staffing firms.
Well, this is no surprise why outsourcing's gone up, fourfold under this government and double under the previous government. This is out of control. I'm going to ask Ms. Jurgen, would you be able to, around the task authorizations that GC Strategies provided to this committee last year, you signed for 2 task authorizations, 2022-00080 and 2022-016-142. These task authorizations were for a total of $10.2 million. However, the prime contract they were issued was only for an estimated cost of $2.35 million. Now, my first problem is that the task authorizations can exceed the value of a prime contract, yet these tasks are more than 4 times the value of their contract. The second problem is that the contract they were issued under appears to not exist. GC Strategies didn't provide it to this committee. It doesn't exist on the Canada Buys database. There's no record of it existing. So first question is, how are task authorizations that were more than 4 times the value of their contract even permitted to be issued?
So if I did sign a task authorization, I would have verified it against the contract and ensured that it was issued outside under a specific awarded contract. I would have to see the task authorizations that you are referring to, and I would be happy to, if you presented those to me, I would be happy to come back with that information for you.
Yeah, if you could table that to the committee, and you're willing to, that would be appreciated. I think if the committee, if I have permission to ask the witness to produce those within 3 weeks.
Yes, we'd love to see the documents where you are signing off on a task authorization associated with a contract that doesn't exist. Please deliver those to the committee. We would love to be seeing those.
Before we get back to it, we've got 761 watching and 739 likes. If you haven't given us a like yet, please give us a thumbs up. It helps push the stream out to other Canadians who need to see what's going on inside our government.
And thank you, everybody, for getting those likes almost up to equilibrium. Anyway, let's keep going.
Yeah, we're fine, Mr. Johns. Thanks.
Great. Second, does the prime contract cited in these task authorizations exist? If so, can you provide it to this committee and tell us why it isn't publicly disclosed?
If you provide me the task authorizations, I can make that reference, certainly.
I cited those numbers, so I'm hoping that you can table those numbers that I cited. Is that agreed?
Get the clerk.
Yeah, the clerk will follow up.
There you go.
The what you've cited in the blues and get it to Ms. Durrigan.
Can you also, table Ritika Dutt and Amir Morzhev's consent to be named in the task authorization? Can you table those documents?
So you're looking, sorry, can you repeat the question and just reaffirm what exactly you're looking for?
To table Ritika Dutt and Amir Morzhev's consent to be named in the task authorization.
Mr. President,
Certification of personnel.
with respect to certification of personnel, is optional whether they are actually requested. In this case here, we would have to go back to CBSA to see whether or not they actually requested those documents.
I'd like permission from the committee to have those documents tabled to the committee. Indigenous set-asides, I previously told this committee how much I value
Can I interrupt for a sec,
strategy.
Mr. Johns, and I'll pause your time. Is this a request from the committee for an order of production of documents or a regular? Yes. Okay. Members, we're fine with that?
Yes.
So does that mean that they're forcing him?
So I think
Is that what that means?
What's
They're
that?
not just asking him to produce documents, they're actually forcing him? Or did I miss something here?
Well, they're saying that they're required to. So
Yeah, so it's not just a, please, can you bring these documents in for us?
well, let's be honest. When committee asks a government agency to provide documents, they can't say no because they're in the government. It's a little different when they're asking a third party, an external witness. So when, if they ask them, they can say no. But then if they can then say, well, we actually want these, so they can compel them to produce the documents. So even though they're asking, they're not really asking. They're telling.
were you asking Ms. Durgan or from Mr. Mills? Or just from?
For Mr. Mills, he can make the request to CBSA and provide them to the committee.
Okay. That's
I
Mr.
previously
Jones.
told.
So just to touch on this again. So the reason why the NDP, and this is opinion, the reason why the NDP are distancing themselves and acting this way as it relates to ArriveCan, you'll also notice that they're probably doing the same thing with the slush fund, which we're going to be getting into. Not on this stream, obviously, but it's because I'm pretty sure nobody in that party is involved with any of the corruption related to all of this money flying around, because they're technically not in government. So I think they see what's going to be happening out of this, and our prediction is that our original prediction was that the NDP was going to exit this relationship with the Liberals for other reasons. It was primarily focused around the riding boundary changes next spring that introduced a whole bunch of problems for the Liberals and the NDP. And they were going to use the lack of a pharmacare plan as an excuse to do that. But now there's a legitimate excuse to distance themselves from the Liberals, because I think they see what's coming. And what's coming, based on everything that we're seeing here, is there are tentacles, not just from ArriveCan. The Liberals can say, well, this has nothing to do with ArriveCan. Well, That's the incorrect way to put it. The investigation by the RCMP is not about ArriveCan. It's about the corrupt government procurement processes. Because guaranteed, this is not isolated to ArriveCan. We've already seen it in ArriveCan, and we've seen it in Botler. And the chances of these being the first contracts that this corruption is evident in is very, very low. So that means that there are dozens, maybe hundreds of contracts out there where there's just corruption run amok within the government. And they see that this is going to be reaching up into elected officials. And when that happens, all hell's going to break loose within the government, and that's when you will see this government fall. That's when, because nobody, no political party is going to risk aligning themselves with the Liberals when there's something like that just explodes. They cannot shrug that off, and there's no amount of speeches or promises that are going to get the NDP and the Bloc to do anything but get as far away from the Liberals and point a finger and cast stones at them as possible. So the NDP see the writing on the wall, and they've been slowly distancing themselves over the last couple of weeks, and that's going to continue. Just watch.
I previously told this committee how much I value the procurement strategy for Indigenous business, and I think we all should, and how critical Indigenous leadership and involvement in procurement is. It's something New Democrats have been fighting hard for, especially in procurement opportunities that directly affect Indigenous communities. I want to make sure what's happening with these set-asides, but what I've heard, it doesn't seem like it is what's supposed to be. PSPC's rules for the program are rightly set up to make sure that work doesn't simply get subcontract to non-Indigenous entities. But when I asked Dalian about how they subcontract Indigenous set-aside contracts, I was appalled by their answers. They did not acknowledge the requirements for subcontractors to be Indigenous. In fact, Mr. Yao, said the rules allow us to hire pretty much whoever we want. He also told us that the Indigenous set-aside requirements are audited on every joint venture Dalian and Cordex do. Is it true that this is being audited on every joint venture they do? And is it true that Indigenous Services Canada has audited the Botler work in particular, as Mr. Yao claimed?
Yeah, we're out of time. Is it a quick yes or no, Mr. Mills?
It's a quick answer. Mr. President, you'd have to direct that question to Indigenous Services Canada, who administers that program.
Yeah, not our problem again.
Mr. Brock, for 5 minutes, please.
Yes.
Here, Ms. Chan, does PSPC have its own legal department?
Oh my God. Okay. I hope Ms. Chan is a decent person. I don't know if she is. I don't know if she isn't. But when you have Mr. Brock looking at you with those eyes and asking you, so, is there a legal department? It's just, you're in for a bad day.
Yeah, I'm not even joking. I'm taking a screenshot of this for a thumbnail later. This is awesome.
You're in for a bad day.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We consulted with Legal at Justice Canada.
Okay, so nothing internal? Do you have a particular lawyer that you deal with at the DOJ?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. There's a reason why I asked you that. So I want to go through a thread of emails between yourself and Ritika Dutt. She brought to your attention on May 10th, 2023, a number of concerns that Coridex and Dalian were using their names as resources without their knowledge and consent and received payments from the government under the TA, that during the bidding process, they falsely claimed that they had been in contact with Botler and sought their input. An ATIP with CBSA confirmed that there was no fixation of status of personnel on file, that they in fact filed legal notice to the contractor to produce the document, and they failed to comply. They sought your help to compel the contractor to produce the document. There are elements of criminality in that email, that not only is there potential breach of contract and regulations with respect to the TA, but we have elements of fraud and forgery. Did you get a sense that there was a red flag in this, and whether or not you passed this on to the GOJ for consultation? Yes or no?
We did pass along what we found, and we were in constant consultation throughout the course of this investigation.
Did you consult the DOJ in relation to that email?
Yes.
You did? Did you get a legal opinion?
Yes.
Okay. And the legal opinion, without getting into specifics, but allowed you to continue pursuing that documentation that they requested?
While we had.
Yes or no?
While our first and foremost priority was to protect Canada and to investigate whether or not if the allegations of fraud from the prime contractor occurred.
Yes. Okay. So you sent an email to Julie Prudhomme on May the 26th requesting information from the contract regarding the allegations. May 26th, you received a further email from Botler that they were never contracted by Cordex to provide any feedback on the TA, did not provide recommendations on any resources, that the mandatory requirements table for herself that was submitted with the TA significantly inflated her work experience and not reflective of her actual work experience. She did not agree or consent to be named on the TA or for the work to be implemented. Again, the specter of criminality. And now we have got the specter of a forged resume. Another red flag. Did you send that particular email to the GOJ for consultation?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Now, we already know what the evidence was. Okay, Christian Firth has testified in his illogical fantasy of simply making a mistake could have been believed if there was one modification to Ritika Dutt's resume. But memory serves me correct without looking at the transcript that he had attempted on at least 5, if not 6 occasions to deliberately manipulate the work experience so that when they inputted that data on the required forms, that they would qualify for funding. That is not only forgery, that is fraud. So my question to you is, why did you not just shut down immediately this operation between GC Strategies, Cordex, and Dalian against the specter of criminality?
Well, that's a question.
Before we answer, I do want to address some of these comments in the chat because you guys are hilarious. I'm just going to read them out rapid fire style. We've got Unlock the Brock. That look needs to be on a Christmas card. The Intimidator. Brock all the way. He reminds me of the Eagle Muppet. Brock is a monster, but he's our monster. Brock is giving her the stink eye. Brock and roll. Let me see here.
Brock the Rock.
Yep, Brock the Rock.
Brock Norris. I like that one. There's definitely going to be some jokes coming from that. So
awesome.
Anyhow, thank you everybody for that. Brock'em Sock'em. I love that. That's a great one.
I think I saw Brocken in the free world. Sorry. These are just, you guys are awesome. These are great.
But yeah. This lady. She's not in good standing with Mr. Brock. I can tell you that right now. That's why he's taking this approach. And I think he obviously sees that she's nervous. Everybody sees that she's nervous. And he's going to try and keep pushing until he gets what he wants.
It's obvious. Was it not obvious to you? I'm not asking Mr. Mills. I'm asking Ms. Chan.
Whoa, there you go. So Mr. Mills was trying to jump in and say something. He's like, no, you be quiet. You weren't even invited. I'm talking to the witness. Love it.
All right. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Again, our priority was to investigate the allegations made to Dalian or Cordex. When we asked Dalian to provide documentations that they did receive payments from CBSA, and they did pay out, as we found out later, that they were provided the resources from GC Strategies.
Okay, I'm not talking about that. You have a specter now of fraudulent resumes. Did you go to GC Strategies? Did you go to Coredex and say, what is going on here? You are misleading the government. You are abusing taxpayer monies. Did you do that, Ms. Chan? Ms. Chan?
Pay attention.
Very briefly, please.
I'm analyzing data, and from what we observed was that Dalian Coredex were obtained those documents from GC Strategies. What we found was that there was nothing out of the ordinary with the contractors.
Thanks, Ms. Strand. Mr. Souza for 5 minutes, please.
Okay. She just got herself in a world of trouble there. World of trouble. So, yeah. That's going to be a big problem. When you have the people in question saying, my resumes from my organization were doctored. And then you have this lady saying, well, I checked with Dalian and they said there's nothing out of the ordinary. That's your answer? Really? You're going to have a bad day. And I don't know if she's kicking herself for how she answered that, but the short answer is no, I didn't go to Dalian. Like what? You're going to take the word of the contractor over the person whose resume it is? Imagine you walk into a job a job interview and you start talking to the interviewer and they say, "Oh, well, you have too much experience." And you're going to say, "What do you mean? I have this amount of experience." "Well, you have too much experience. The recruiter that sent you to us gave us this resume." And you're going to say, "Well, that's incorrect. This is my experience." "Well, we don't trust you. We trust the recruiter. The recruiter is going to know your experience far better than you know yourself." It's not like, you lived your own life and actually had these jobs, right? Like when you reduce this to absurdity, it is just ridiculous. It is absolutely stupid. And it's amazing how many different people are now being brought in and exposed to be party to this corrupt process. It is absolutely insane. And I guarantee you, folks, this is just getting started. Remember, there's 300,000 people that work for the public service in the federal government. We've spoken to probably 10 of them. We as in committee. 10 of them. We're just getting started. And now we get to go with Mr. Mobster. He acts like it. Mr. Charles Souza. So everyone put your mouth guards in because you're going to be grinding your teeth.
Ms. Dorgan, Ms. Chan, Ms. Spencer, thank you for being here, and I appreciate you being here, and I understand this must be difficult at times, and I just want to clarify something that was stated earlier. It's my understanding that you've agreed to come, but you've also asked for your colleagues to be here as well. Is that correct? Were they told, but did they say they wanted to come, or did you request them to be here?
What do you think they're going to say, you moron? Oh my God. Do you really think these people with their boss and their boss's boss and their boss's boss's boss, you really think they're going to say, "No, I didn't want them to be here. They just showed up"? Do you seriously think that that's what's going to happen? Give me a break. And it doesn't matter if they want them here or not, Sousa. They weren't invited. They weren't invited.
Like, how did that come to be?
Look! Look!
We're just coming as a representative of the 5 of us for PSPC with all of our different, expertise, if you will.
Right.
And levels. So.
And do you feel comfortable that the other 2 are here? Because we only asked for the 3 of you, but I just want to make certain that it's something that are not uncomfortable having. Like this, my understanding was that you've asked for some backup in case we got more complex.
No,
Wow.
What a bizarre line of questioning.
Wow. Yeah. Are you comfortable? What do you think's going to happen if they say, no, I'm not comfortable. Please kick my boss out. And please kick the head of my agency out.
But like you're testifying at a committee regarding like multi-million-dollar fraud on the Canadian government. You're not supposed to be comfortable.
No. And guess what? If you did everything proper and you did everything in the best interest of Canadians, you probably wouldn't have been called to committee. Just saying. Like, hello. And you're asking these people to basically say, like, this is the thing. I hate this. I hate this. I don't know the character of the three ladies that are sitting there. Let's just, for the benefit of their doubt, for the time being, for the next 2 minutes, let's just say that they are innocent in all of this. We don't know if they're guilty in all of this. Let's just say they're innocent in all this. You are asking these people to essentially decide, do you want your bosses to be asked to leave this hearing? Are you comfortable? What the heck do you think these people are going to say? There's only one answer they can only say. Yeah, they have no choice but to say anything else but yes. And shame on Mr. Sousa. He's a Liberal, surprise, surprise. But shame on Mr. Sousa for using them as essentially a prop to justify why these two other senior executives are sitting in that room. Okay, the assumption of innocence has expired. Now we can get back into the committee.
Before that, we're going to read this super chat from Ryan Piplinski. Thank you very much. Brock Norris once roundhouse kicked someone so hard that his foot broke the speed of light. I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah. This one and this.
We appreciate the support, and we have no issue with them being present with us.
Great.
Wait, point of order, Chair.
Please go ahead.
With great respect for these witnesses, I mean, they're being put in a very strange position by Mr. Sousa's question, because they're
holy crap.
Like, these are the people they work for on a daily
Generous
basis.
agrees with me.
So I think he could focus on the issue at hand.
Mr. Generous, I'm gonna say, it's Mr. Sousa's time, and I'll let him ask his questions.
It's not wrong.
The difference, okay, so the difference between the Conservatives and the Liberal chairs is the Conservatives actually acknowledge what a point of order is. Technically, that wasn't a point of order. But, point made.
Well, that's it. Genuous was right.
And he got it on the record. And that's all he wanted to do, I guarantee you. He wanted to get it on the record that the Liberals were trying to put these people in a very awkward position.
Mr. Chan, there's obviously now an investigation underway, but is this an investigation around ArriveCan?
Jesus.
Thank you for the
Every
question.
time.
How many times are you going to ask that?
There is, however, a review, internal review, and there's also a review being done by the RCMP in regards to this particular issue with regards to Botler's allegations. Have you been contacted by RCMP?
I have not.
Ms. Mansour, have you been contacted by RCMP?
Not yet.
Ms. Dorgan?
I have not.
Gentlemen, have anybody contacted you regarding this issue?
No.
Oh my God.
In regards to the contract, I'm not really sure who to ask this, but Ms. Durgan, I'm going to go to you on this one. I'm going to try to respectfully ask the three of you on these issues, and I do appreciate backup where necessary.
Oh, jeez.
In a contract like
so
that, which was
transparent.
just done in respect to the Botler's issue, Cordex and Dowling received the contract. They were bidders, and they won the deal. Thereafter, commissions, splits, who they hire, what they subcontract with, is not subject to increased pricing, correct? It's based on what they were contracted to do, is that correct?
Correct. They need to follow up on the pricing schedule that was listed on the contract.
So when they say they received a cut or they receive commissions, these are individuals that are corporations. So they're subcontracting themselves, like they're working in regards to deliverables that are required. Is that right, Mr. Durgan?
Yes, we don't have any oversight on what commissions are, or what the cuts are, or how payment is made between prime contractors and subcontractors. Our calculations are based on the firm per diem rates that are in the contract.
So, Ms. Mansour, are these contracts inflated thereafter? Or are they just what they are? And then whatever happens in the tail end, that's between individuals amongst themselves, how much they're going to share of the pie. Is that correct to assume?
This is a competitive contract, so the rate we got was on a competitive base. We cannot inflate it after the fact. Once it's in the basis of payment, it remains, the per diem rates do not change.
Did Botler, they mentioned that they had active engagement with the government, as they wouldn't be required, in order to deliver. Were any of the three of you involved in ongoing contacts with the entrepreneurs, the individuals? No. Just for the benefit of the committee and those watching, Ms. Durga, can you tell us about your training? Like, what is it that you guys are trained to do?
We're, I guess, subject matter experts. We're in procurement. I myself have been working in procurement for over 20 years, with 30 years in the federal government. Most of that 20 years has been in IT professional services as my forte, if you will. And I manage a team of procurement officers who will provide acquisition services to other government departments for IT professional services.
Ms. Chan?
I started my career in the government in the Intern Officer Development Program in June of 2019. I went on various assignments, and then in August 2022, I returned back to EL Division under Angela Degrin.
Ms. Mansour?
I've been with Public Services Government Canada for 23 years, 17 in IT professional services and 2 years in goods.
That is amazing, and that is, and I appreciate your technical expertise and subject matter knowledge.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sousa.
It's actually not amazing. It's actually the opposite of amazing. One of the biggest problems that I know about people that work in government is that the vast majority of them have never worked outside of government. Or if they have, it's been in a very limited capacity, like these folks. So why is that relevant? Well, the thing is anyone who's worked in private, or let's just say not government, it's a different ballgame. If you screw up, you're fired. If you overspend on a budget by 100%, 50%, 20%, you have to answer for that. And in many cases, you're fired. It's like I'm on an episode of The Apprentice here. There are so many things that government employees do that if they did in a private environment, just a normal company, they would be fired. Why? Because there's actually consequences. If you don't make budget, you have to let employees go. If you screw up a project, you have clients that are going to walk away, and then you lose that revenue, and then you have to let employees go. You have to make cuts. You have to do all of this stuff. But from what I'm told, that doesn't happen in government.
Well, because they're just taking more taxpayer money, or they're printing it at Bank of Canada. Like, right. There's no consequences.
And the problem is you have these people that if you've been working in that position for 20 years, I'm sorry, but you're a terrible employee. In 20 years, you've managed to make it 2 positions? Really? That's it?
Well, to be fair, not everybody has like ambitions of climbing the corporate ladder, right? Some people get to a certain point and stop, and that's totally fine.
True, but when it's the vast majority of government employees, and what you see, and when you see these people's resumes, they bounce around. We've been looking at this as we've done our research. They just bounce around from department to department to department. Oh, you're doing a crap job at that department? You can apply elsewhere. At a private organization, if you have a terrible performance record, you're not allowed to apply for any other position. Why? Because they don't believe in moving the problem elsewhere. I will say that it happens sometimes, but those are with organizations with terrible HR departments, and they're out there. They're for sure out there. But in general, it's not going to happen. So these people need a taste of the real world to understand what working actually is. And to anybody that has worked in government, if I'm disrespecting you, I apologize. Well, I don't really apologize. I apologize if I've offended you, but I'm sorry, but this is how it works.
Before we continue, I want to say thank you to Ashton and welcome to NP Supporter. And then we have Amanda Ferreira with a $20 super sticker. Thank you very much for your first super on a live stream. And thank you to Jer Savoy with a $5 super chat. Last project manager fires spending $200K couple site.
I think he's saying there was a project manager fired for spending $200,000 over a couple sites. That's what I'm getting from that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, and it's a good example. Now, I will say, because I want to make sure that I don't lump every single public service in the same boat, there are going to be some tenured people that are fantastic employees, and they do fantastic work. However, there's a systemic problem in this government, and it's waste, and it's entitlement, laziness. There's a problem. And somebody needs to get in there and fix it.
Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Mr. Mills. I'll come back to my last question. Why, and I really wonder about this, why can a company, a recruitment company, be awarded a contract and then have to subcontract a different recruitment company, which in turn does the recruiting from wherever? Why was the initial recruitment company taken on if they didn't have what it took to hire the resources needed for the contract? We see this with Botler. I'm thinking about ArriveCan and all other instances where this might have occurred. That a contractor, a recruitment company, subcontracting a different recruitment company, I think is just bizarre. Why not hire the right recruitment company in the first place?
That's a great question.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. In certain cases, as in this case, there are two types of task-based contracts, one of which is deliverables-based and one of which is individual-based. In the case of deliverables-based, it is the requirement of the company to figure out how best to bring the resources to meet the requirement that the government puts forward. Sometimes in those cases, you have a recruitment company, as you call them, that has access to a wide variety of resources, but there may be some specific technical resource that they don't have relationships with. And in this industry, they may partner with another company, which in itself has access to other resources to bring those people in to deliver a deliverable such as this. In most cases, at the beginning, if it's the task base where we're looking at in terms of professionals, the professionals are identified and the skill sets are identified, and we are picking firms that already have relationships, have subcontractors, and have employees that have those skill sets.
Dans le cas de Butler and I,
in the case of Botler, Dalian and Coradix didn't have the resources, and GC Strategies had one or had been recommended one, and so they went through GC Strategies but still got the contract at the outset because they didn't have the right resources. That's really quite astounding.
initially with Cortex Stallion, it was for a wide range of IT services. Not all of the services under the contract were identified at the beginning. As I think testimony has shown before on this, there was a requirement to design something to aid the department in terms of their approach to addressing sexual harassment, and that's why they brought in the GC strategies and Botler.
But they didn't. They didn't. You keep saying that, and they didn't. But, you know, by all means, keep saying that, because you're just going to... You're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble, because that's not what happened. And we know that's not what happened. Cameron McDonald says that's not what happened. So, but, you know, by all means, keep saying that. And here's the thing. I can understand if the government went to one recruiter and said, we need to find some people. Fine. They find some people. I could even understand if that firm found a company that specializes in certain types of technology, like an app company. Sure, I can understand them bringing them in. But I do not buy for a second this BS about a staffing firm saying, oh, well, we don't want to do that. We're going to subcontract that to another staffing firm that does the exact same work. I don't buy it, and nobody else should either. Amanda Ferreira, the $10 super chat. Thank you so much. I can't believe we are living in this in real time. Thank you for everything you do. You two are absolutely amazing. Oh, thank you very much, Amanda. We really, really appreciate that. Those comments make these late nights a little bit more tolerable.
They do. It's very much a labor of love. Cypher was up until 4 a.m. last night editing the video we dropped, I guess technically this morning. It was supposed to be a last night video, but it was a this morning video. But we do it because we love it. We do it because we believe in it.
Well, and we also do it because of our son. And, you know, we see the Canada that has evolved around us, and it's not a place that we want to live anymore. You can't move. So, you know, we decided that we couldn't continue on and, you know, let him grow up in a country that was deteriorating like this, and be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and, you know, realize that we did nothing to try and change that world for him. So that's the primary driver for what we're doing.
And you guys have heard me say before that, you know, if we sit here and do nothing, definitely nothing will change. But if you do something, it doesn't matter how small you think it is. You could share a video. You could write your MP. You could talk to your neighbor. It doesn't matter how small you think it is. There's a chance that something could change.
I would rather try and fail miserably than sit there wondering what could have happened for the rest of my life. As the great Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. It's great advice. And, you know, that goes for everybody, you know, listening too. Each of you can be a real force for change. Just decide to do it. Whatever you think you can. And that change doesn't have to be large. It can be very small, but that small change can have very wide-reaching impact. Right? Even sharing a video, attending a meeting, casting a vote, that's doing something. So, just some food for thought for everybody. Did we get to Joseph Mann yet?
So thank you to Joseph Mann with a $13.99 super sticker. Little avocado, I think, says thank you. Oh, no, it's a pear. It's a pear. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, let's get back to it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johns, please.
So PSPC is also responsible for ensuring that contractors qualify for task authorization. So Ms. Dutt and Mr. Moore, each had 7 years of relevant experience. They needed 10 years to qualify for the work, and fraudulent qualifications were submitted for them without their knowledge, which you heard about at previous testimony of this committee. Have you figured out how this happened, who is responsible, and how will you make sure it doesn't happen again? And are you going to check GC Strategy's previous submissions to find out if this was done for other contracts?
for the question. I think as has been indicated before, there's an RCMP investigation. There is also an investigation within CBSA to look at this specific instance to see how this took place. I will say that we are very concerned and very interested in ensuring that the integrity of the procurement system. We are looking at these instruments. We're looking at all of our professional services contracting mechanisms to look at how can we ensure that they are above reproach, that they are effective, and that they don't allow these kinds of things to happen in the future.
I'm going to go back to the fact that I cited that there's no limit, and you confirm that there is no limit on commissions. So we could see half of the contract tendering going out to commissions. Why is it that PSPC has not been able to hire or recruit a human resource recruitment specialist for IT and pay them a good wage? I mean, the GC Strategies has made upwards 15 to 30% on their over $50 million in government contracts. Let's call it they made $10 million between two people that aren't even specialists in IT. This is a problem. If PSPC looking at how they're going to change this model, and I actually can see why they can't find anyone, because it's way better to be doing and more lucrative what GC Strategies is doing. This has to be fixed.
Mr. President, I
don't think any of them have said that yet in committee. Like quite that brazenly. This has to be fixed. I don't think I've heard anyone say it in quite those terms.
Well, it's good that the NDP is actually saying it. I think the Conservatives have... I don't think they're talking about the root problem yet and what needs to be done. I think they're still trying to get to the bottom of it. But yeah, it's good to see someone actually saying it. And it's good to hear the NDP actually saying it.
And before we get back to it, we want to say thank you to Carolyn Gronland with a $2 super sticker. It's a little pear that says, "Hey, you." Thank you.
Hey.
Take umbrage with the fact that there's no limit. As we've mentioned before, this is a competitive environment. People, the ultimate IT experts that are doing the work with the necessary experience and skills will not work for zero. They actually demand a wage. It's a
But the recruitment specialists are the ones that are taking the cut. I'm not talking about the workers. They're being exploited, clearly. The contractors, the subcontractors are being exploited. They're being exploited by these recruitment companies. Are you going to fix this recruitment process so that it's in-house instead of using these headhunters that are just milking the Canadian taxpayer?
That is our time. Perhaps you can get back to us on Mr. Johnson's next round. Mr. Barrett, please.
Mr. Barrett.
I'd like to start with Mr. Mills. Were any contracting rules broken on the ArriveCan app, yes or no?
No.
No.
Were the contracts given to GC Strategies good value, yes or no?
Mr. President, I'm not in a position to assess the value for money of contract.
Of course not.
Those contracts.
Okay, so the Government of Canada briefed you for this committee, and the documents on your website say, on the fees charged by GC Strategies for managing these contracts, the rates were reviewed by PSPC officials, and they were deemed fair and reasonable based on the knowledge of the commodity. So do you or don't you agree with your department's briefing materials for you in advance of meetings here at the Government Operations Committee for the House of Commons?
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Whoops.
Oh, that's beautiful, Barrett. Guys tries to sidestep the question again and say, "Oh, I'm not in a position." Actually, you are, because your department did a report on it because of the crap storm that happened with ArriveCan. And the question was asked, "Is this fair value?" And your department tried to cover its ass and say, yeah, it is, because we negotiated the contract." Love it. Get them.
Mr. Chair, I would agree that the fees charged
Thank
were
you
reasonable.
very much. So to be clear, PSPC thinks that it's fair value to pay GC Strategies, a two-person IT staffing company, to get paid $11 million to use the advanced tools of LinkedIn Direct Message and Google searches.
Wow.
For the ArriveCan app.
Even Brock's laughing.
So you think that that's good value? It's yes or no question, sir?
Mr. Chair, $11 million went to pay for IT specialists as well as the people that
We're
work
going to
for
circle
GC
back
Strategies.
to your briefing materials that said you believe it's good value, so we'll take that as a yes.
Oh,
You
like
want-
I said, Barrett's savage, but he's
Polite about
charming
it.
savage. Yeah.
And you know what? I love it. They're basically saying, okay, you wanted to come to committee? Fine. Come to committee. But we're going to be asking you some questions at committee. And you're probably going to regret even stepping in the door.
They got paid millions and millions of dollars for this boondoggle. And the position of PSPC is that this is good value. The previous member asking questions wondered, why wouldn't you just hire someone to do this in-house? I have full confidence that the caliber of people working in Canada's public service are able to use tools well more advanced than the ones that the principals at this organization said that they use to earn their millions off of struggling taxpayers. Did anyone from your department who worked on ArriveCan receive bonuses? Yes or no?
Uh-oh.
Ooh.
Uh-oh. Should have stayed home. Should have stayed home.
Received bonuses.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the sound of Michael Mills having an accident in that chair.
Mr. Chair, I need a new chair, please.
Yeah.
Executives, yes, during the period of this time, there would have
Okay.
been executives who received bonuses.
So the government's of the position that this is fair value. $11 million to a two-person staffing firm who did no work on this app, and we're to be told that the contracting system is fair. You know, a previous member said, well, they can't inflate the price. Well, obviously, the price is inflated when there's the ability for ghost contractors and middlemen to make millions of dollars by subbing out the work and never doing a keystroke themselves.
And that is such a good point, and I'm glad Barrett made it. Because he's right. If you have that much room in a contract that you can sub it out to other subcontractors and they can also take a cut and their work still gets done, that's called inflated. That's called far too much money went into that contract. That's what that means. And it's such a good point of just common sense and reduction that you can't argue with it. At least not without looking like a fool.
The relationship between this Liberal government, senior government officials, and insiders, consultants, and lobbyists it's incredibly frustrating for me, but the messages that I'm hearing from Canadians is that they find it that it's disgusting. We have Canadians who are struggling. We have, over the last 8 years, rents have doubled. Mortgage payments are up by 151%. More than 2 million monthly users of food banks, a third of those are children. And everything that has happened with the ArriveCan app and the responses that we're getting that this is fair value for Canadians' money, this is why Canadians have lost faith in the head of government, the Prime Minister. This is why they are losing faith in their institutions. Because it's not reasonable to say, I don't find it reasonable or credible that we can hear that, well, it's fair value. You know, there's no room for them for the contractors to bid up higher commissions. The project shouldn't have cost $54 million if a couple of yo-yos in a basement using Google are able to collect $11 million. So if you need specialists on how to find some savings, I'm sure that there's people who are a lot smarter than me who can find ways other than that big red circle that I just drew around the $11 million. I don't have any more questions.
Whoa.
Grand total of, I think, 2 or 3 questions from Barrett, and the rest of it was just to give this guy a shellacking.
Well, and like he's angry, yes, and we have seen Barrett angry before. but he, like right now, he's disgusted. Like you can see it in his face, you can hear it in his voice. He's disgusted, and he has every right to be.
Well, that's because every Canadian is disgusted. At least every Canadian that's paying attention.
Yeah, Canadians are suffering, like Mr. Barrett said. Food bank usage is up. Rents have doubled. Mortgages have doubled. All these talking points that we've been hearing from the Conservatives in question period over and over and over. And this guy's like, oh yeah, it was fair value for money to have this bloated $54 million contract that passed through all these subcontractors and ghost contractors to get this app built that two guys were able to clone in a weekend for $250,000.
Right?
Totally great value.
And talking about value, that's why the Conservatives are in person at virtually every single government function. Because they are trying to display to Canadians that, yes, every Canadian knows what an MP makes. And they're trying to show that they're earning it. And that's up to each Canadian to judge it by themselves. But when it comes to ArriveCan and all of this crap, and again, it goes beyond ArriveCan. ArriveCan is just what we have visibility to. It's just a snapshot of all of the problems within this government. So good on you, Barrett. Good on you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Polowski, please.
So I've got a lot of questions, and I have to admit I came into this book in chapter 12, so I'm trying to still figure this out. But there's been the allegation that the resumes of a couple of Botler employees were doctored to make them look better than they were, to make it 10 years that they were of experience they had when they didn't have that experience. Now, am I right, Mr. Mills? You said that it's actually the departments, not PSPC, who has the task of ensuring that subcontractors actually have the ability to do the tasks that they're entrusted with. And so in this case, would that be CBSA would be the ones that would be responsible for looking at the resumes, or would it be you?
You're correct in the sense that it is the responsibility of the department, in this case CBSA, to determine what their needs are, what the criteria that they will evaluate against those needs and set the grids, and then actually to undertake what we would call the technical evaluation of looking at the qualifications and experience of those resources against their need.
Now, am I right, or did I get you wrong when you said that PSPC enters into 10,000 different procurement agreements per year? Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, we undertake 10,000 contractual items a year, so a large part of that would be entering into new contracts, and the rest would be things such as issuing task authorizations or amending existing contracts.
So it would seem to me that it requires a lot of departmental time if they're going to assess the abilities of subcontractors to perform the tasks and do such things that look at the resumes of everybody who's subcontracting. Is that the case? How many people are employed in our government to do this kind of work in each department?
I would say, Mr. Chair, it's not that simple in the sense of each department will provide departmental resources. So in many cases, there would be a project. So there'd be a team that's working on the project that would undertake the evaluation of those resumes and whatnot. It's not necessarily that they have a dedicated team to review resumes and do the technical authorities. It's really on a case-by-case basis based on which unit of the department is undertaking that. In some cases, their own internal procurement folks will assist them, but it varies from department.
That's funny. I think he just swung and missed that softball that was just given to him. So what Albert Einstein was just asking him was essentially, he was trying to lead him and frame the question that it was suggested by Mr. Barrett that we should be able to find this talent ourselves. And the question was mainly, how much effort would that take across all departments, because you do 10,000 contracts, and how much effort would that take to actually have somebody or some people to screen all of those contracts for resumes and all of that? That's what the question was. And the response was supposed to be, oh, well, that would be a inordinate amount of effort, sir. And this is why we use external contractors to find these people for us. That's essentially what he was looking to get out of that question. But the response was, well, you know, the current departments, they're involved in the project. They check the resumes. And so he actually swung.
So they're already doing it, yeah.
Right. So that's the thing. He completely whiffed on that and essentially justified Barrett's question and Barrett's point and invalidated the framing that Albert Einstein there was trying to make. So that's actually quite funny that happened.
Well, and think of how much you might pay a recruiting agent. Or you could even have an army of recruiting agents. It's not going to be $54 million. You know, like how much money could you save if you had them in-house?
Lots.
Yeah.
Before we get going, Johnny O with a $7 super chat. What about the fact that this app put people in hotels and they were assaulted and quarantined people for 10,000 people? Illegally.
Yeah, it sent out notifications to people who were not supposed to be in quarantine.
So it's kind of being analyzed right now in terms of false imprisonment.
Yeah, like you can't tell me you couldn't have done this by people just showing their vaccine certificates at the border.
Right.
Like I think the government made this mandatory because they had to justify that $54 million price tag.
Yeah, I was calling this guy Albert Einstein just by the hair, but yeah. Sober Bill Blair, I'll go with that.
Oh, just out of curiosity, given the size of the government and the number of subcontracting agencies and the number of resumes which must go to the government, like how can you prove anyone's resume? I mean, I've sent my resumes to enough places, but I don't know that anybody actually goes to the university and says, did Marcus Pawlowski really get his MD or his LLB from your university? So, I mean, how much really checking of resumes occurs by the government?
Really? That's the stance you're taking, Pawlowski?
No, but it does happen, though. I recall that you had applied for a position, and we had to go, like, all over the house looking for your university diploma because we had, like, recently moved, so it was in a box somewhere.
Yeah, I actually had to send any of the certifications that I stated that I had on my resume. I had to take pictures of those and send them and provide copies of that. Now, the problem is this is a completely false premise of this question because the issue isn't that the individual provided a false resume. That's not the problem here, Pawlowski. The problem is that the individual themselves is the one that complained that somebody else altered their resume. That's the problem here. So you're saying, well, how could they possibly do that? Well, how about you listen to the complaint that was actually submitted by Ratika Dutt? How about that? She's saying, listen, my resume was altered. That's all the proof you need. So, nice try with the false premise, but that's not working. And Glenn Stewart with a $5 super chat, thank you very much. Let's get the steak and fire ready for Mills. There you go. Don't forget the tar and feathers.
That's a good question for technical authorities about how much they validate the information, and their focus is really looking at the resumes and seeing if the years of work, the types of experience are related to what's being requested. I'm not sure across departments what other levels of investigation and verification they do of the actual, did they attend this university to the resume. What I can say is that through the procurement process and within contracts, it is representations and warranties on the part of prime contractors that they attest to the validity of the information in those resumes.
So that's the prime contractor has the obligation to attest to. Okay. The second thing we've heard from several members of the committee questioning what value, if any, companies like Dalian and Coridex provide for the charges and the government money they receive. I wonder if I could ask you, because I would have thought, okay, you might question spending a lot of money on on these sort of intermediaries, but I would have thought they perform some valuable tasks which take time and save those tasks, because the question was, why don't you deal with subcontractors directly? Do they not do a fair bit of the administrative things that are required in order to get something done for the government? Is that not the value that they add?
No. And the reason I know that is because they said so.
Yeah, they literally open up Chrome or Firefox or what have you, and then they go to their LinkedIn, and then they start messaging people. That's the value.
What Christian Firth literally said, I'm not quoting him, but this is what he said. He said that they go and find the talent, they assign it to the people in the government, and they have nothing to do with that other than the government coming to them and saying, we are not satisfied with that performance of that individual, go find us something else. That's what Christian Firth said that they do. That's it. That is the end of it. So no, they don't provide a valuable service. Now, Dalian tried to create a different narrative and say, oh, well, we do all of this stuff. Well, it doesn't sound like it. Because if he did, then none of this would have happened. Well, we're ISO 9001 certified, and we've been audited. Well, who audited you? GC Strategies? Because evidently your processes suck, and you do no value for the government.
Very brief answer, please.
Mr. Chair, I would say they had a number of values, but one is sourcing people with the skills, putting together teams, and then, yes, they do manage a lot of the administrative tasks in terms of payroll and whatnot for those consultants and managing the legal relationships in between them.
Thanks, Mr. Mills. Mr. Genuous, please, for 5.
Oh, Genuous.
Was the timer? Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Ms. Durgan, I understand that you are the signing authority for ArriveCan with GC Strategies. Is that correct? You were the person who signed for the oversaw the contract from PSPC side.
So there were several contracts that I did work on, yes. And I did have a certain delegation of authority, but I also received approval authority depending on the value of the requirements. Depending on the value, maybe what level I would go to, whether it be ADM or senior director.
Okay. Do you know who was responsible for making the decision to choose GC Strategies over Deloitte for the ArriveCan contract?
For the initial ArriveCan contract, it was CBSA that approached us with a procurement strategy for sole sourcing, and they presented GC Strategies to PSPC.
Who was the person from CBSA who brought that to you?
I don't know who brought it to us directly from CBSA. We received a package from them, but I don't know who made the decision. I have no oversight.
It is a matter of dispute that has led various CBSA officials to accuse each other of lying in terms of who actually made the decision. Does anybody on the panel know or have any information that will help us know who made that initial decision? No. Okay.
Isn't that a problem? Just saying, isn't that a problem? The answer is yes, that's a problem. Because these people are the ones, stiffening up their back and saying, well, we're the ones that signs off on the contract. Shouldn't you know who made the decision to actually use a specific vendor? Shouldn't that kind of be attached to that package of what that contract is? Wouldn't you think that's important? Because how else are you authorizing this contract to actually go forward in the first place if you don't have sign-off from somebody at the agency who's requesting it in the first place? That's kind of important. Like, holy crap, man. And then, does anybody know? Oh, we don't know.
I'm sure they don't.
Ladies and gentlemen, 20 years. She said she's been there for 20 years. And she's standing there looking like a deer in the headlights. Unbelievable.
To your knowledge, was Deloitte, quote unquote, in the penalty box?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Would you have signed contracts with Deloitte around the same time that you were signing the contract for ArriveCan?
Good question.
I would have to go back and look at that time frame, but I work on a lot of contracts.
Okay. But
I guess I'm not understanding what the question is or what the correlation is between whether or not I signed anything with Deloitte with GC Strategies.
The context is that a bid was put in by GC Strategies and by Deloitte for ArriveCan. And the decision was made to go with ArriveCan on the basis that allegedly Deloitte was quote unquote in the penalty box, which meant that contrary to the claims of Mr. Mills, this is a competitive situation. It wasn't a competitive situation. Deloitte was allegedly excluded from consideration for reasons unknown,
Point of order,
and
Mr.
that meant GC Strategies was selected. So
point of order.
Who's bringing that up?
Yes, sir. Go ahead. If it's a point of order, please, a real one.
A real one?
Well, I know it's not a real one, but just as a clarification,
Okay.
I think it was Botler.
Come on. He admits it's not a real point of order. Just be quiet and let me answer the question.
All
Ask the questions, Mr. Jahari.
All of us,
Thank you
please.
for
Wow!
Point of order.
It's pretty.
Wow.
Did Genuous just shut that down?
Yeah, he said, how about you just be quiet and let her answer the question? Wow.
Attaboy.
Unless I misheard that, I'm pretty sure that's what he said. Good boy. Good boy. He gets a cookie.
Nah, let's buy him a beer.
Maybe. No, he gets a pizza. Let's buy Genuous a pizza.
Pretty disgraceful there. Chair,
wow.
Can I
Amazing.
Can I get some clarity then on the issue of penalty box? As far as you know, nobody was in the penalty box. Signing contracts with Deloitte was fine and permitted during this time. Can I actually talk to the people who do the frontline work things?
Wow.
Shut it, Mills.
Amazing.
Genuous is so good, man.
He's on fire.
He's and just for those that don't know, those that are relatively new to politics, this used to be Pierre's style. By the way, when he was in committee, this was almost to a T Pierre's style. He was the guy that just had no patience, no tolerance for bullshit. So if someone was trying to go off, he would just say, "No, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to this person over here." Just no regard.
Well, because they have no set amount of time, right? So he wants to make sure that he gets the answers that he wants during his time.
From the people that he wants.
Exactly.
Knowledge of Deloitte being in a penalty box.
Okay, Mr. Mills, very quickly, do you have any knowledge of Deloitte being in a penalty box?
Mr. Chair, I do not have any knowledge.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much. Would you,
ladies and gentlemen, that directly refutes Mr. Cameron McDonald's claim and Mr. Antonio Utano's claim that Deloitte was in a penalty box. If they even were.
Doesn't sound like they were.
So that being the case, doesn't sound like there was a competition. Something's not working here.
be able to, Ms. Durgan, provide us with detailed information about, for the ArriveCan contract specifically, which companies got certain amounts of money? How much went to Carotix? How much went to Dalian? How much went to GC Strategies? How much and how much went to other subcontract entities? Do you have all that information?
I do not have that information.
Okay, does anybody have that information?
Yes, you do.
Mr. Chair, we would have the information of contract values that were awarded, but how much actually was expended would have, and some of the task authorizations would have to come from CBSA.
Okay. We seem to have gotten the runaround a little bit. So I hope there's maybe agreement from the committee to request that information from both entities. How much money went to each entity? We can request the information from CBSA and PSPC, and whoever has it will give it to us.
Yeah, so, okay. This is one thing that Mills is correct on. So what PSPC does is they process the contract, they sign the contract, and that sort of thing. This is it shows the uselessness of PSPC, in my humble opinion, because they're essentially the internal GC strategies here. They don't really do a lot of work. So what Genuous is asking is, how much did each of these contractors and subcontractors for ArriveCan actually get paid by the federal government? Now, what PSPC is saying is, well, we can't tell you what they actually got paid. All we can tell you is the value of each contract that was awarded. And what they're saying is that the individual agency, in this case, Canada Border Services, they are the ones that actually issued payment. That is correct, because it is the agency itself that holds the budget. So each agency has their own CFO, you know, like it's almost like mini organizations, mini companies within the government. Think of agencies as companies. So each of them has payroll, and each of them has, you know, CFOs and HR departments and all of this stuff. So when it came to actually paying the contractors, that was from the agency themselves. So CBSA is saying, oh, well, you know, that's not us. Yeah, it absolutely is you. It 100% is you.
Is that agreeable?
More specific, just for the clerk so she can note it down.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like the breakdown of how much, as part of the 54 million that was spent on ArriveCan, how much went to each company. Who were the people that received money as part of that contract?
Just one moment, please.
So they're taking a break here so the clerk can actually put together the request so it's accurate, and then it goes to the agencies in question so they can formally request this, and then they're obliged to provide this evidence to committee.
And I want to read this comment from Ryan Peplinski. Brock Norris once punched a man in the soul.
Yeah, that's fine. And deadline, please, Mr. Generous. The usual 3 weeks.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah.
We will follow up, but the clerk will follow up with the exact details.
Thank you, Chair. So fundamentally, your department is responsible for assessing value for money in the context of procurement. I understand that to be part of your responsibilities. And I've been able to find a list of apps that were developed under the previous Harper Conservative government, apps that are complex in nature, apps like the CRA Business Tax Reminder app, the CBSA E-Declaration app, Canadian Armed Forces app, etc. All of these apps were developed in most cases for well under $500,000. In one case for closer to $3 million. This particular app was developed at costs that were dramatically out of proportion with the costs of other apps that have been developed previously under the previous government. Doesn't this suggest that your department failed to do its job in terms of achieving value for money?
Good question.
Very nice.
And he's not wrong. He is not wrong. Now, some people may argue, well, you know, this is you know, going to be in the hands of every Canadian citizen. Well, what about the CRA app? That has the potential to be in the hands of every Canadian adult citizen. So that doesn't wash. And just because an app is in the hands of a Canadian citizen doesn't mean the app is going to be complex. So don't even start. And the other question they should be asking is, who were the contractors involved in those apps? And if they were successful, why were they not suggested as potential suitors for this app? There's all of these corresponding questions that can be built upon to really tear ArriveCan to pieces.
Ms. Durgan, did you want to intervene on that?
I don't have any visibility on that. With respect to value for money, I work on individual contracts, and we do our due diligence with respect to, you know, competitive processes and, you know.
Okay, so who's looking at the value for money piece then? Is that
I'm
is that
afraid
you,
that's our time. Mr. Kuzmirchuk, please, for 5.
Saved by the Cal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to say, start off by saying thank you so very much, Ms. Durgan, Chan, and Mensur, for, again, your service, the many years of service that you provided to to this government, to procurement, and to IT. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time to share some of your expertise here. Question to Mr. Mills: if PSPC,
what is it that you do?
Became aware of embellishment, for example, CV embellishment that we heard, in order to allegedly for companies to win bids, help them win bids. If you came across evidence of CV embellishment, what are some of the steps and repercussions that PSPC would take?
So under the code for procurement, we do, if they are, suppliers are supposed to act honorably and ethically, and if we were to find out that they were not doing so and that they had misrepresented themselves, we could stop work on a contract, we could set aside a contract, and if it was founded, we could terminate for default.
Is it possible that also that vendor would also be banned, for example? Are there situations where, again, if somebody, if there's misconduct, where, again, CV is embellished and whatnot, could that certain company be banned as well, too, from future procurement?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are vendor performance measures where we could actually suspend them from being able to do business with the Government of Canada for a period of time. And in extreme cases, if there was criminal findings of fraud and the like, the integrity regime could come into play, and they would be disbarred for, I believe, 10 years?
Could be
up to 10 years. They could be disbarred.
And even if it's not, even if it doesn't rise to the level of, let's say, fraud legally, for example, how long would something, again, like CV embellishment, whatnot, how long would it, would that stay on the record, let's say, for future bids? Is that something that PSPC would take into consideration? I'm talking about the whole gamut of misdemeanors, let's say, against an organization. Everything from misdemeanors to fraud. Is there a track record? Does PSPC keep sort of tabs on bad behavior?
I might ask Levent, who's a long career in procurement, who may have better examples.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Under the vendor performance corrective measures policy, we do keep track of terminations for default. In the case of a false certification, that certainly would be grounds to terminate a contract, for default, and that would remain on the record for a period of time. Depending on the severity of the termination, that could also result in debarment, either on the first offense or subsequent offenses.
How severe is CV embellishment, let's say, when someone is submitting to try to win a contract? How severe is that in the eyes of PSPC?
CV embellishment is fraud.
It is a very severe occurrence. There's also a framework to actually assess the impact on the specific client and the project, and what that might cause in terms of damages to the Crown. And from there, there's an assessment that is made to determine the ultimate outcome of the penalty.
So there is a framework in place, a process in place to determine how serious that misclassification is.
Correct.
That embellishment is. Okay.
Didn't they, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't these people say earlier that they don't do that? Yet there's a process and a framework for them to follow? Just saying. Thought I heard that. 2+2 cats with a 99-cent super chat. Thank you so much for that. Thank you very much.
Oh, and if those are your cats in the photo, they're really cute.
There you go. Fox likes her cats.
Fox loves cats.
Investigation of misconduct, for example, is that the responsibility, like in this situation, would that be the responsibility of PSPC, or would that be the responsibility of the department, CBSA in this case, to further investigate that misconduct? Who takes the reins on investigating a misconduct?
Mr. Chair, we within PSPC have a departmental oversight branch and they have within their unit and kind of an investigative group that would look into it. They would typically coordinate with the client department and based on the situation decide who would be the lead and how they would collaborate.
Is that what's happening here with the investigation of Botler AI currently? Who's taking the lead on that? I understand CBSA is doing its own internal investigation. Is PSPC part of that investigation as well too? Was PSPC part of that?
To my understanding, Mr. Chair, our department has assisted them, but certainly it's CBSA
that's taken the lead. Okay. Question for you: in the procurement process, when CBSA comes to you and wants to hire, for example, vendors, do they usually come to you with choices? Like, here are the 3 horses we're looking at, and then PSPC makes a final determination which is the best one? Or do they come to you with one, and then PSPC simply investigates one, or do both things happen?
So it's a really good question that I saw in the chat. So just happened to glance over. The question was, so why, this is from Lynn O'Farrell, why is Public Service Procurement Canada still accepting bids from GC Strategies, given the fact that the RCMP is investigating GC Strategies? So
they just announced this week that they aren't. Correct?
Yeah, so the CBSA announced that they're putting all contracts with Dalian, Corradics, and GC Strategies on hold. My question is why isn't PSPC doing that? And that's the question. That is the question that Lynn asked. That's a good question. Why are they not doing that? It has actually, like, you have the resume holders, the people that the resumes were written by, saying this was inflated. Usually, if people are going to be lying about a resume, they're going to say that I had, not that I had too much experience. That they're probably not going to do that if they're the ones that are responsible for it, but they don't have to worry about it. They have testimony. They have testimony from last week from Christian Firth that he doctored the resumes. 100%.
But it was a mistake to send them.
Yet he went on to describe that that's the practice. We alter them to meet the criteria.
And we do want to say thank you to everybody on the stream. We've reached 1,012 likes. So give yourselves a round of applause.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are shooting for the record. I don't know what that record is. I just know it's over 1,000. Oh, we lost one. We're down to 1,011. Not sure how that happened. Anyway, so yeah, it's a really good question. All of them should be disqualified right now.
That's our time, but maybe you can offer a very brief answer, Mr. Mills.
In most cases, they come to us to use the TBIPs, which has a requirement to actually compete it to a number of firms already pre-qualified on that instrument.
Thanks, Mr. Kuzmirchuk. We'll go to Ms. Vignola, and then Mr. Johns. We're going to combine their 2.5 for the next 2 rounds, so it'll be 5 and 5, and they'll be done for the day. Ms. Vignola.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Mr. Osmutlu, there are 2 contracts associated with ArriveCan, and those contracts were 33% of the contract were for Indigenous companies. But only a gentleman, Mr. Yeun Adelian, is Indigenous. He said he did have subcontractors from an Indigenous subcontractors, but couldn't say who. The idea for this is to not only give more contracts to Indigenous people, but to help them acquire expert knowledge and skills that are useful to them, to Canada, and to the economy. First question, if only one person comes from a First Nation and is an entrepreneur, is that contract automatically counted as being part of the Indigenous contracts strategy?
You'll have to ask the Indigenous.
Thank you very much for the question. In the case of the procurement vehicle that we're talking about, which is the TBIP supply arrangement, there are a number of Indigenous firms which are qualified and which are eligible to compete for business that is directed under that stream. And that would determine the winner of that contract. In this case, it was Dalian and Corradics.
Wait, why does this guy know the answer to these questions? Mills said that they should refer to these questions regarding the Indigenous procurement to the department that actually runs the program. This guy seems to know what he's talking about. So, ask this guy questions.
Compris.
That I have understood. But if within the company to which the contract is awarded, if there is one single employee who is a member of the First Nations, and if that happens to be the business owner, is that enough for that company, Dalian in this case, to be awarded the contract?
Requirements under the PSIP program are administered by Indigenous Services Canada, who will periodically audit the companies to ensure that they are in line with those requirements. As indicated earlier, there are some content requirements which must be met in order to meet that requirement.
Yeah, but come on, that's a lame answer. You guys keep talking about the value that PSPC provides during the procurement process. You guys are the ones that evaluate the contracts. You guys are the ones that actually sign the contracts. You guys are the ones that adjudicate the vendors. You guys are the ones that pre-qualify the vendors. and you're trying to say that you don't know what the requirements are for this process, that is 100% bull. You just don't want to say because it's going to make you all look like a bunch of idiots in front of committee. So, on that, let me just take a look at something that I was sent. Interpretation Bulletin, Procurement Strategy for Aboriginal Business. The procurement strategy for Aboriginal business is a program designed to increase Aboriginal business participation in supplying government procurement requirements through a program of mandatory and selective set-asides and supplier development activities leading to increased representation of Aboriginal businesses in contract awards by individual departments and agencies. In regards to the issue in question, CPN 1996-2 specifically notes, quote, required Aboriginal content means at least 33% of the total value of the work to be performed under a contract is performed by an Aboriginal business contractor or by a combination of what that contractor and other Aboriginal businesses.
So that information was released exclusively to us at Northern Perspective as part of Botler's Declassified series. Again, our opinions on this live stream do not represent Botler's opinions. These are our opinions from Northern Perspective. And if you check out that bar at the top of the chat there, you can check out Botler's Twitter, and they are releasing evidence regularly on their Twitter.
Continuing on, to clarify, in this section, the term, quote, Aboriginal business contractor refers to an Aboriginal business, as defined under the rules PSAB, with which the government has contracted. In this section, the term value of work refers to the monetary compensation assigned to contracted deliverables. Additional confusion around this and other contracting policy notices regarding PSAB may also stem from the two distinctive instances in which a requirement involving 33% is noted. Under the policy, an Aboriginal contractor must certify that it meets certain criteria to qualify as an Aboriginal business. A. Sole proprietorship, limited company, cooperative partnership, or not-for-profit organization in which Aboriginal persons have majority ownership and control, meaning at least 51%, and in which, in the case of a business enterprise with 6 or more full-time employees, at least 33% of the full-time employees are Aboriginal persons. Or B. A joint venture or consortium in which an Aboriginal business or Aboriginal businesses, as defined in A, have at least 51% ownership and control, and C, which certifies in bid documentation that it meets the above eligibility criteria, agrees to comply with required Aboriginal content in the performance of the contract, and agrees to furnish required proof and comply with the eligibility auditing provisions. Oh my goodness.
That was a mouthful. Break it down for us.
Okay. You ready? So what that says is that in order for you to be classified as an Aboriginal contracting business, you need to have a company that's at least 51% owned by someone who is of Aboriginal lineage, and is either a not-for-profit organization, it can be a cooperative or partnership or limited company. Now, here's the thing. It says, in which Aboriginal persons have a majority ownership and control, meaning at least 51%, and in which, in the case of a business enterprise with 6 or more full-time employees, at least 33% of the full-time employees are Aboriginal persons. So, let's break this down. How many employees does Dalian have, everybody?
Just the 2?
3.
Oh, 3.
Including the owner. The owner is Indigenous. The other 2 are not Indigenous. Why would they only have 3 employees when they have Karatics with I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 employees. It's so they meet the government criteria. They legally only have 3 employees. And 33%, they meet that requirement too, because there's 3 of them. The employee, that's the 33%, is the owner of the company. And because they're in quote-unquote joint venture, they win the contract. Dalian wins the contract with their 3 employees that do nothing. And then they give it to Craddock's to do the work. Because they're technically not the same company. It's complete manipulation of the process.
Well, and that's the problem, is it's taking something like a process that was created in good faith, you know, to help First Nations people and business owners. And these guys are just abusing it to suit their will, to steal all this money from taxpayers.
And it's completely against the entire spirit of this in the first place. Now, you may agree or disagree with the process. That actually doesn't matter. The issue at hand is that they're fudging everything and how they even operate in order to actually make themselves compliant. It's actually quite disgusting. And again, just to reiterate, that's our opinion. That is not Botler's opinion. Let's continue, shall we?
Donc, il devrait avoir plus que...
So there should be more than one Indigenous person. That is how I understand it. But as I see it, the company in question needs to have more than one Indigenous person who is member of the First Nations to be included in the strategy.
Thank you for the question. It's more about the value that's delivered as opposed to the number of employees in this instance.
Je vous pose cette question.
I'm putting this question because what I basically want to know is this. How can we ensure, how do you ensure that a company engaged by a member of the First Nations doesn't serve as a screen for a different company associated potentially with it, solely for the purpose of obtaining contracts and without any goals that are actually in line with the strategy designed to empower the First Nations? How do you ensure they're not being used as a screen and being abused?
Thank you for the question. This is what the pre-award audit that's conducted by Indigenous Services Canada would determine, is that they meet the requirements of the program, which would be to adhere to all of those rules. And PSPC would award those contracts based on the fact that these companies are on the Indigenous Business Directory, which is managed by Indigenous Services Canada.
Wow. So
Okay,
PSPC plays no role in that whatsoever.
So if they meet the requirements, that's all you need. You don't delve deeper to check whether a company owned by a person from the First Nations, well, that's enough. That's where you stop. Regardless of whether that First Nation person is actually doing anything tangible and may only be serving as a smokescreen. As long as your basic requirements are met, that's it. So how does that actually provide the First Nations with the kind of value that would serve to enhance their autonomy, their independence?
Thank you again for the question. As indicated, Indigenous Services Canada is responsible for administering the program, and the PSPC procurement activity is in line with those policies. And we do check to ensure that the companies with whom we contract are, in fact, on the Indigenous Business Directory. And
so you look at a list. Congratulations. That's the value you're providing. Are they on that list? Yes. Oh, then they're Indigenous.
Well, and it doesn't seem like they go below that. They don't go, oh, these guys are going to subcontract out somebody else. Again, it's just a screen.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that is our responsibility.
Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, please.
Okay. In these contracts, Dalian, Cordex, and GC Strategies, they're taking care of the most basic core administrative aspects of contracting for the government. You've affirmed this. Now, how is it possible that the federal government, with all its resources, doesn't have the capacity to execute its own security clearances and take care of its own invoicing and payments? And how are we going to fix this?
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, Mr. Mills, I think you could take it.
Mr. Chair, the government does do projects by itself with its own staff. And in other cases, they have time-limited projects where it does not make business sense for them to go out and directly engage resources within their departmental responsibilities to undertake their projects. So we make these vehicles available on an optional basis to serve departments when they've decided in their own terms that it makes sense.
And you see in this situation, it's turned into be a disaster. Are you going to fix it?
Mr. Chair,
are you going to come forward with changes?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned before, based on what we're seeing here today, we are looking very seriously at all these instruments, and we're looking at what improvements we need to make to the instruments and what improvements we need to make in terms of training, delegations, and whatnot to make sure that they are administered effectively in the future.
Okay. My colleague across the table, Mr. Souza, stated that none of the work can be subject to price increases once it's assigned. It's just private companies negotiating over the slice of the pie, and the government can't increase the task value once it's assigned. But that's clearly not true. We've seen task prices absolutely balloon after they are Botler, that when Dalian was brought in through a pass-through and demanded 15% for doing so, CBSA was pissed, is what he said, at the resulting price increase. And that email is public. I want to clarify all of this on the record because I find it very inaccurate, and I want Canadians to hear the truth on this.
Mr. Chair, as was mentioned earlier by some of our team members, when the contract is initially set up, there are rate guides within there, and in administering task authorization subsequent to those contracts, they have to respect those limits.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the fact that we don't know. There is no limit on how many people can take a cut of a contract. Have you done an analysis on this, on the ArriveCan app, on how much commission went out in the total value of the $54 million spent on the ArriveCan app?
We have not undertaken that analysis.
Isn't that important to know?
Would it be something that PSPC could do and then report back to the committee?
Mentioned before, we had set fixed limits for the resources. We see what the invoicing is based on those fixed limits, but I do not have the information below what has been invoiced on the fixed rates to determine who got paid what. Those are internal business relationships between prime contractors and their subcontractors.
And I think the public has every single right to know the
100%.
answer to that question. And I agree, with my colleague, Mr. Kuzmirchuk, about the value and appreciation we have for the work that you've done and the commitment all of you have made to Canada. It's really hard to be in a committee setting and be pressing you like this, but people are struggling and they're not getting the answers they need. And I have to say, I've heard this isn't good for the morale of public servants when they hear a company taking $11 or $10 million slice of $55 million in contracts when they're not even experts in that field.
Here's the union
Are
side.
you looking at fixing it to bring in-house the capacity to, and replace these subcontractors that don't have the expertise to do that work on behalf of Canadians in-house? Are you looking at doing that?
Johns, you were doing so well. Then you had to take the union stance. So he's bringing it back to the NDP pro-union position here. He's basically saying, well, the Public Service Alliance of Canada is not happy to hear that these people are being paid work that union people could have been paid.
Ugh.
That's basically what he's saying there. He was doing so well with his questions, and then he had to go down that route.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's actually, like, for a party that's not the Conservatives, he was doing pretty good. But, again, just toss that out the window.
It doesn't invalidate his previous questions, but it taints it. It taints my opinion of him in this committee.
Again, Mr. Chair, each project, each IT arrangement is done within the authorities of a department. Departments will determine what's the best way to actually deliver that and what resources they can have. I will just say that some projects require very specific skill sets that a single department would not typically have, nor would it make sense for them to engage and to employ for a significant period of time.
I have time for one last question. Ms. Dutt, she sent an email 2 weeks before that email. CBSA was looking at, helping support their project and actually looking at assigning more additional resources. She sends an email. The next day, her contract gets cut. Do you not see that as reprisal from the government of Canada? The timing just looks obvious that it's reprisal. Is this common?
Mr. Chair, I cannot comment on that. I have no knowledge about it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Johns. Ms. Kusi, please.
Nice.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Chan, I'm looking at the email from Ritika Dutt on Friday, May 26, where she states, while work was done for the implementation of Botler's solution in the CBSA, we did not agree or consent to be named on this TA or for the work to be implemented under this specific TA. Since our personal information has been used by Caradix to implement the task authorization, we are requesting that Caradix produce any documentation claiming to contain our consent to be named as resources in this TA. We also request documentation of alleged correspondence and feedback between Botler and Caradix during the implementation of this TA, including naming Patrick Van Ambiba as a resource based on Botler's feedback. I then look at your response, Ms. Chen, on June 5th, Monday, June 5th, 2023, in an email back to Ms. Dutt, which states, in light of the facts presented to us, Canada has determined this matter is an issue between the three parties, yourself, the contractor, Dalian Enterprises, and Caradix Technology Consulting in joint venture, and the third party, GC Strategies. No further action required on our part. When you got that initial email from Ms. Dutt, who did you consult with?
Yeah, because that's bad. Because they keep saying that their only obligation, PSPC, their only obligation is to the prime contractor. They keep saying this over and over again. Okay, well, the prime contractor is Dalian Caradix. And if they are claiming that Botler gave consent to be named as resources on the task authorization, they're saying we want it. That information belongs to Botler. And the response from Ms. Chan was basically like, well, that's between you and them. No, it certainly isn't. Because the task authorization came from the government. And in order to put them on there, Caradix, to my understanding, would have had to provide the consent of those resources to be named on the task authorization. So, hello? I'm very curious to see what she answers here.
Thank you for the question. I consulted with our legal advisor at Justice.
Okay, did you consult with anyone else on your team? Did you consult with Ms. Durrigan? Did you consult with Mr. Mills?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and what was their recommendation at that time?
To investigate the matter and bring it up to Dalian and Caradix.
Okay, but who made the final decision that this wasn't that this wasn't the problem of CBSA that you could resolve yourself at? Who made the final decision that you could simply say back to Botler that we wash our hands of this? We consider the case closed from our part. You're going to have to work it out with the other individuals. Who made that final decision?
So Chan's being put in a very difficult position by that question, because she's a peon for all intents and purposes, and because of these allegations of misconduct and all of this, she's not making these decisions. She's doing what she's told, and this is why Stephanie Kusi is asking who made that decision. It's not going to be Chan. And that's also why Kusi said, did you consult with Durrigan or Mills on this? Because they're people that can actually make a decision. And so she said yes. So she's asking, who was it?
It was a collective decision.
Who made the final decision?
Oh my
there must
God.
have been one person that said to you, Ms. Chan, you know what, I've we're not going to deal with this. We're not going to get involved. This is the way it is in the government Canada. People get paid outlandish amounts. This is the way contracting is. We just sign the sections. You know, I was very fortunate to be with Global Affairs Canada for close to 15 years. I was a management consular officer there. I've been through procurement strategies. The training, I'll admit I haven't received the extent to which you have, but it's very clear, the outlines for what classifies for a sole proprietorship, when these conditions are not met, what it is. That when there is a contract you are drawing from with a preferred supplier, you know, that it is astounding that these contracts were 4 times over the amount. The rules are very clear. They're very precise. But at the same time, we have our own judgment as individuals and as teams, where we go, this doesn't make sense. This is an outlandish amount, or this doesn't make sense. And at some place, the buck has to stop, and it's somewhere someone has to take responsibility. So who made the final decision that it was not for you to decide? You can wash your hands of it. Your organization could wash your hands of it, and you could just write that note to Ms. Dutt and say that that Canada is not involved, and you have to work it out with these other 3 shady companies.
I will repeat myself that it was a collective decision that was based on the evidence that were provided by the contractors. That was also in consultation with our legal advisor. I came to that conclusion. I shared that conclusion with my supervisors, Ms. Mansour, Ms. Durgan. We all 3 of us agreed. I executed and I sent the email.
Okay, so you're taking personal responsibility for that.
Oh, no. Well, here's your fall guy within, or fall gal within PSPC, people. It's Miss Chan. Miss Chan is the fall gal. You know, this is what I hate. So I have been a people manager for a while. And a people manager with integrity, her bosses are there. A people manager with integrity that stands up and says, oh, I have 20 years experience in here, should have been jumping in there and saying, excuse me, Anita, I'll take this one. I made the decision. I'm accountable. She's my employee. I made the decision. That's what a people manager with actual integrity would do. And the fact that those 2 people there, one's a supervisor, one's a manager, is just sitting back and saying nothing and watching this lady taking and holding the bag for this is absolutely disgusting. It's just totally disgusting to me. I can't even. I have no tolerance for managers that operate this way. And again, this goes back to my point. These people haven't worked outside of government. They have no idea what integrity even means. These 2 managers that are sitting there. Anyway, this rant could go on for an hour, so I'm going to stop it.
I have some more news for the committee. In that June 5th email, it does say Canada has determined. Well, Canada, as outlined under the Government of Canada buy and sell website, that Canada is defined as His Majesty, the King, in right of Canada, as represented by, wait for it, the Minister of Public Works and Government Services. So Canada is someone. It is a minister, and they are ultimately responsible for what has happened here today, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, with my remaining time, I would just like please to check in on the situation with Mr. Doan, who, of course, appeared before this committee previously, and we had discussed based upon the outcome of his initial appearance that we'd be interested in having a further conversation with him. Where are we at, please, with his appearance?
So interesting, she tied that up to the elected official. Not surprising. Good move. Because, yeah, if they're trying to say, and they do, in their emails, they say Canada has determined. Quoting Ms. Chan, in light of the facts presented to us, Canada has determined that this matter is an issue between the three parties, yourself, contractor Dalian Enterprises and Cortex Technology Consulting and Joint Venture, and the third party GC Strategies. No further action is required on our part. End quote. That was an email from Anita Chan to Miss Ratika Dutt on June 5th. So if that's the stance that they're taking, that's the stance that the Conservatives are going to say, all right, fine. You want to take that stance? Guess what? You're basically saying that that's the minister. Elected official. So that's interesting. Makes you wonder if this did go beyond that department. No, this isn't Mendocino. Mendocino was the Minister of Public Safety.
Sorry, which minister did they say it was again?
This would probably be Treasury Board at the time. So the current minister is Anita Anand, but that was shuffled in August. So it was the previous minister. So anyhow, what happened at the end is Stephanie Kusi is asking about. So where's Mindone at? The CIO that Cameron McDonald said was lying to committee. Where's he at? What are we doing with that recall of him to committee?
We have not set a date or a request or an invite to him just yet.
Okay. We'll be doing that.
We'll send in an invite, yes.
Okay.
And the other ones were, I understand, the other ones named the other day were, we'd agreed there'd be a summons for them.
Okay.
But for Mr. Doan, it would be an invite.
Okay. Has he showed any reluctance to
We
appear?
haven't-
Because if there is, I'm ready to
We
present
have
a motion
not-
to summons him.
We have not contacted him
Okay,
yet.
all right.
I do worry that, as we've seen, a fair amount of reluctance for witnesses, period, to show up today.
Okay,
I'll
well,
be
I hope
honest.
he's listening and he understands that he certainly can be summoned as other individuals have been. Thank you, Chair.
If he's listening.
Jory, please.
Be a fool to think that he wasn't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Lord.
Welcome to the committee. And right off the bat,
Oh, my
did
goodness.
any of you three show any reluctance to come to this committee?
I did not. What kind of
No, thank
question
you.
is that?
Okay, I
you
want
gonna
to
say
follow
yes?
up on the line of questioning that my colleague, MP Kuzmerchuk, started. Probably I start with Mr. Mill. Mr. Mill, when the ArriveCan requirement was submitted to PSPC, to your department, was there a number of firm identified, or did you guys go through the approved list that you had and then you run a, what was the process?
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. To my understanding, with respect to the GC Strategies contract, CBSA approached the department and said that they have a requirement to move quickly to build a technology solution to support their administration of the borders and to protect the health of Canadians on COVID-19, and that they'd identified GC Strategies as a firm with the ability, the readiness, and the capability to do it, and they had a sole source justification for why they were going to go forward with that firm.
Okay, so PSPC did not run any process because it was identified as a sole source.
Wait. If they had a sole source justification, that means there wasn't a competition process.
So everything McDonald said was a lie in that regard. That Deloitte wasn't in the penalty box. They just had this sole source competition thing.
Yeah, because I guess it's possible that in the sole source they said we tried, and Deloitte was the only other one that could put forth a bid, but they're in the quote-unquote penalty box, so they were disqualified. I guess technically they could have written that in there. I'd be interested to see what the sole source read. Sole as in SOLE, as in single.
This was April 2020. It was the
Sure.
eye of the storm of the pandemic, and they needed to move urgently, and they had identified this company and had a sole source justification, which is in line with the emergency contracting authorities at time.
Out of the 10,000, let's say, and I hear the number, so I'm referring, out of the 10,000, how many of those contracts went through such a sole source process? Roughly.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry I'm drawing a blank, but I would believe on an annual basis, we're probably more than 80% are competitively awarded in terms of our contracts. We'd have to get back to you with the number.
Okay, please do. I have another question, and anybody can answer that. Does PSPC at any time look at the scope of the work, or you just say,
They would have no
okay,
idea.
we understand what the ask is, and you go out and look for vendors? Do you look at the scope of the work and look at the type of resourcing that's needed?
They would have no idea.
Mr. Chair, we do look at the scope at a very high level, particularly with respect to these instruments, because we need to make sure that there are different streams within the TBIPs, and we need to make sure that the scope of work is aligning with the appropriate stream. And then once contracts are bid and proposals and task authorization put forward, that the actual work is aligned with the stream that was initially awarded when we awarded the contract.
So the reason I'm asking, I'm going down
have
that
no
path
idea.
is because we've heard from, now I'm talking about Butler AI, we've heard about the fact that in Butler's mind, they were doing a pilot and they were doing a proof of concept. And in the CBS's mind, they were doing a feasibility study. Those two are completely different things. When you were evaluating, or where your department was evaluating that contract, is it your understanding that the primary contractor deliverable was a pilot, or was it a proof of concept?
You ask these questions so terribly. Proof of concept is the same as a pilot. You meant to say pilot or feasibility study. So we actually go through in our video that we dropped this morning. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. We actually show proof that CBSA did think that this was an actual pilot. We show proof in an email from a manager of design and deployment. And they specifically refer to the work that Botler was doing as a pilot. So if you haven't tired of us after this stream, which we're on hour number 3 on, take a look at that, because it actually shows proof that CBSA did regard this as a pilot.
Maybe I'll turn to my colleagues. My understanding with that piece of work, the key focus was the task authorization. Was it aligned with Cortex Dalian's requirement to provide IT services? So it was IT services on the task authorization aligned with the scope of IT services. I do believe that it was more of a study, a feasibility piece on the TA, as opposed to identifying Botler or identifying specifically piloting the implementation of AI technologies.
Wow. So they're basically saying the way they evaluated that task authorization as they were evaluating the contract was, well, was there IT work involved? Yes. Okay, I guess Dalian gets it then. This is what I'm saying. These guys have no idea how to evaluate scope. Completely useless and a waste of taxpayer money.
So you're saying it was a feasibility study rather than piloting. Ms. Chan, can you add anything to that?
I just want to mention that the original contracting authority who was responsible when that TA was issued is not with us, but what we have on file. Basically, for the scope of the contract, whenever we have an issue, whenever we have a TA that comes to us for signing, we verify to make sure the scope of the TA aligns with the scope of the contract. For this particular contract, it was for general informatics professional services in relations to feasibility and new technology aligning with CBSA's business and security systems. AI
Sorry,
was
time, I'm afraid, Ms.
part
Chan.
of that.
Mr. Brock? Thanks. Mr. Brock, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of housekeeping matters to you, Mr. Mills. You referenced that a number of people within the PSPC received bonuses. Would you please table all the names of all employees at PSPC who received bonuses during the ArriveCan creation, implementation, that period of time, please? Would you do that?
Mr. Chair, I'll take back to see what we can do in terms of presenting information about the compensation of public servants. I believe it's some of it's public, but I will take back in terms of what.
I'm specifically asking for the bonuses.
Well, the bonuses are part of the compensation package of public servants under our compensation arrangements. Yes, so I'll take that back.
You'll do that then, sir?
I will endeavor to take back. I'm not sure from a privacy perspective if I can.
You're
make
public
it
servants. There's no privacy issue here.
Nice.
I love when you always know when Brock says just some housekeeping. He's bringing forward the wrecking ball. That's how you know what's coming. It's to get these guys to kind of relax, and then he asks these questions like, "Oh crap."
You further table the NDAs that should have been signed by the Botler company, the resources for TA 2021002043.
That's going to be a problem.
Mr. Chair, I'll have to take that under advisement.
I don't believe it exists.
Wait. All right. Take that for now. Ms. Chan, going back to my line of questioning about all the consultations you had with the DOJ, during any of that period of time, did any memo, did any direction, did any telephone call, any email go to the actual minister? At that point was Helena Jazik. Did anything go to Minister Jazik during that period of time?
I do not have visibility on that, so not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, my last line of questions can be answered by anybody. Globe and Mail on November the 7th reported that President Aaron O'Gorman of the CBSA had asked on November the 3rd, had asked PSPC, and that they agreed to temporarily suspend all CBSA contracts with GC Strategies, Coridex, and Dalian, that the suspension could last up to 180 days. Although these allegations and investigations are not about ArriveCan, she says, I recognize the ongoing audits and investigations may yield findings relevant to that procurement. Now, Canada found out, all of Canada found out on October the 4th, 2023, through another Globe and Mail story, that the RCMP was investigating GC Strategies as the sole source contract with the CBSA and Botler, based on the evidence heard regarding the offenses of forgery and fraud were under consideration. Yet 20 days later, October the 24th, PSPC invites GC Strategies to tender on a temporary help service request. Why?
Great question.
Why indeed?
You knew they were under RCMP investigation, and you're inviting them to tender yet again. And this is for, get this, computer support on a temporary basis, asking a two-person company who works out of their basement, who doesn't provide any service, who's under criminal investigation, to tender on this. Why?
Oh. And this goes back to what you fine people were saying in the chat and what we were saying. Why are they still allowed to do business? Everybody knows they're under RCMP investigation. How are you going to duck this one?
Mr. Chair, we currently have a number of supply arrangements and methods of supply to which GC Strategies is currently a member of those methods of supply. When a requirement comes in under the rules, in some cases, the contracting officer is required to go to every qualified supplier on those instruments and ask for a proposal. So in this case, it would have been
Regardless of whether or not they've received national attention under a criminal investigation, you know full well they've lied at committee. Mr. Firth has lied at committee. He's committed the act of forgery and fraud with respect to changing resumes, and your department thought it prudent to include him in a tendering process, knowing full well that he doesn't have staff. Why couldn't you simply reach out? This is for temporary staff. Why couldn't you put an advertisement on LinkedIn or an advertisement on the internet asking for help? Why did you need a consultant to do your basic work? Why?
Mr. Chair, these instruments have been put in competitively. Many firms have bid these, have spent time to get on these arrangements. A requirement, I'm not familiar with the full details, but I can imagine that a requirement came in for services under this instrument, and our procurement officers would have administered the instrument as per the rules. As we mentioned before, they're under investigate. GC Strategies is under investigation, but they are still member of these instruments.
That's our time. I understand we're going to Mr. Pawlowski, please. Go ahead.
So Mr. John has brought up the fact that we're wasting a lot of Canadian taxpayers' dollars and that we have these cascades of contracts and subcontracts and everybody takes a bit of a cut, and why don't we do something to address this? Well, isn't what normally happens, what prevents this is the competitive process. So if you have a lot of people taking a cut of the pie, you're not going to be able to provide or bid for a service at a reasonable price. So that keeps people in line and keeps this kind of waste from occurring. Is that normally not what happens? And it was not the problem under COVID, the fact that you tried to and had to get out something really quickly, and so you couldn't go through that normal competitive process.
Tried to explain before, but maybe I'm not, is that these contracts are ultimately about IT professionals doing work. Those IT professionals have very unique skills, very sought after skills. In many cases, the competitive process is, and these firms are very challenged to actually find available resources that will be able to come and do the work for the Government of Canada. So in those circumstances, there is a market rate for these sought after resources that does actually place limits on what you could have for overhead. Ultimately, the fixed rate daily per diems for the resource is competed, and those firms in turn have to offer compensation that is amenable to those scarce resources to attract them, to make them want to come and do the work for the Government of Canada. And that in that environment, the competitive process does put into and reduce the overhead and the profit in these industries.
So here's the problem. These staffing firms, the assumption that these guys are making, and I don't think they're stupid. I think they're pleading ignorance here. The assumption that they're making is that these staffing firms are then going and hiring other Canadians in Canada. Well, based on their own admission, they don't have any visibility to what happens. So the staffing firm could say, you know what? We want to make some bank on this one. So we are going to subcontract our $9 million ArriveCan stuff out to East Asia, out to Eastern Europe. Far lower compensation for IT people and other resources out there. The work quality is lower because there's not as much oversight. So what would that allow them to do? That would allow them to up their commission percentage, wouldn't it? They could take the full 30% because they're paying these people half or 3/4 of what a Canadian would expect. So now you have effectively the Government of Canada having foreign nationals building their own government systems.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a recipe for disaster at all.
No, not at all.
Thank you to Shed Dwelling Hermit with a $5 super chat. The Brock moves like a butterfly and stings like a bee. He sure does.
Now, you must have been involved in a lot of different procurement processes under COVID. And I would have thought, or is it, were there a lot of single source contracts awarded under COVID because of the time frame that was involved? And is there a concern that a lot of the companies that we contracted with, because there was no competitive process, because of the urgency, were allowed to charge an inflated rate?
Mr. Chair, it is true that under the early days of COVID, for many commodities, there were not many suppliers, so we did have to enter into sole source contracts. We do, as a course of action, have price verification when we do sole source contracts. Maybe I'll turn to Mr. Osmotlu to explain kind of the work that we do in a sole source to validate pricing and to do price certification.
I am very interested in the price verification you guys did on ArriveCan. Let's hear it, Mr. Osmotlu.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. For sole source contracts, we do seek price support to ensure that the prices that we're paying are in line with market rates. That could be looking at a price certification from a vendor, essentially certifying that Canada is being provided the best price in line with other preferred customers. As well, we may ask for things like invoices charged to other customers for similar quantity and quality of the goods and services.
Harm, do you want to go if we have any time left?
I'm sorry. I just saw Alice's comment. That was no softball. That was a snowball. Yeah, you're right. And there was no possible way he could miss that one.
And I want to say thank you to Nilak with a $2 super chat. Can't stop the Brock. Absolutely.
You have a minute and a half, Mr. Baines.
Okay, just one question here. How could this one is to Mr. Osmotlu. How could the contracting process be modified to provide the federal government more oversight on subcontractors? And what trade-offs would be required to achieve this outcome?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I think, as a result of these proceedings and the investigation, we will take stock of whatever findings there are to determine what improvements are possible. We may seek more visibility on subcontracts. Currently, we rely on the private sector to organize themselves in order to deliver the goods and services that are being sought after. And in fact, many of the private sector entities are appreciative of that approach. And in fact, they want to be nimble and they want to make their own business arrangements in order to supply the goods and services. But if there's a requirement for more visibility in our contracts, we can certainly look at mechanisms to implement those.
Yeah, I think we need more visibility. Just saying.
Yep.
If there's a requirement.
15 seconds, Mr. Baines.
I thank you for coming today and answering our questions.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mr. Generous for 5, and then we'll follow up with Mr. Sousa.
Thank you, Chair. To all of the witnesses, was Minister Jacek involved in any discussions? Did she receive any briefing notes, any information, ask any questions regarding the ArriveCan procurement?
Anyone?
Mr. Chair, I'm not recalling briefings that I participated in. I'm not sure if aware of any that Minister Jacek was involved with.
She's the minister responsible for procurement. This was a relatively high-profile project. Surely, did she ask any questions? Would it have been normal to let the minister know what was going on? I'm getting long pauses here. It's a little bit surprising.
So, Mr. Chair, at the time when a lot of these early procurements were going on for ArriveCan, the focus was certainly in the early days of the pandemic around acquiring PPE.
Yeah.
It was about inquiring about getting vaccines, about getting tests and testing.
Sorry,
services.
I know a filibuster when I see one. Was Minister Jacek
Minister-
informed of did she receive any briefing notes? To your knowledge, like it's a pretty simple question. Either she was kept completely in the dark and didn't ask any questions, or she was aware it was going on. Which is it?
So I believe she would have seen some products, such as our contracts that would have been done under COVID authorities, and so a number of the contracts. But the initial contracts,
including
with GC
ArriveCan
Strategies,
or not?
The initial contracts that were put in place with GC Strategies predated Minister Jacek.
Okay, Minister Mills, can you just answer the question? Did Minister Jacek ask any questions, ask for information, receive any information? Would that have been normal or expected?
So Janice is doing a really good surgical job here of trying to tie the minister to ArriveCan, and it sounds like there is a tie there. Now, whether that is a meaningful tie, that's another question. But he's trying to tie an elected official to this project. And as soon as that they can do that, this changes the entire scope of this. And it allows them to take a completely different plan of attack that they will no doubt add to their toolkit. And it's obvious that Mills is very much trying to dodge these questions to try to keep the minister out of this, because remember, he's appointed. He's appointed on a certain term by the government as a result of the Privy Council. He's accountable to the minister. So that's technically his boss. So he's trying to be very careful around here. And nice try, Clyde. Tried to sneak in without anybody noticing, but everybody knows your icon. So welcome to the stream. And I guess it's only 9:25 out there, so you're still fresh as a daisy. All right, let's go.
Mr. Chair, to my knowledge, I was not asked to provide any briefing on ArriveCan to Minister Jacek. Whether someone else in the department, whether the deputy minister, what, I would not be aware.
You didn't see any briefing notes go up. You didn't get any questions from her or receive any information at all. Just profoundly and curious about this relatively important project of the government of Canada. Does that seem surprising to you?
Does that not seem surprising to you? Crap, I don't have an answer. And it is a good question, because you would think this is probably one of the most significant projects that happened in the pandemic. It is a brand new method of screening people as they come into the country. It's checking their vaccine status, has an automated system in the background that follows some logic that tells people you are quarantined or you're not quarantined. So you're telling me that the Minister of Procurement, who is overall accountable for the authorization of all of these projects, isn't curious about how this is going and isn't curious about how much this is going to be costing Canadians? If they're not, that says something about the minister.
And we want to say thank you to Jay King with a $9.99 super chat. GOC is a clown show and couldn't survive in real world. Makes me feel dirty just hearing what these snake oil salesmen are up to. Absolutely. That's what I said on the last live stream. I feel like I need a shower just listening to these guys talk. It's so gross.
Yeah. And for anybody who doesn't know Clyde Do Something, by the way, check out his channel. He is a good friend of ours out in BC. And he is just like us. He has a lot of integrity. He's a super wonderful guy. He's helped us out on a number of occasions. And, really is interested just in giving Canadians the truth about what's going on with this government. He covers a lot more of a broad range of topics than we can. So he's really, really valuable to listen to. If you haven't yet, check out his channel after this. Give him a subscription and check his content out. He usually has live streams every Friday, assuming he's not sick and under the weather. But I highly recommend his content. Let's continue with the stream.
Sorry, I just don't recall. I have to go back and look at my records.
Okay, could you reply to that question in
Yeah.
writing to this
Yes.
committee? Thank you. I just want to confirm again, is it your department's job to ensure that taxpayers get value for money? Is that part of your mandate?
Mr. Chair, it is part of our mandate. Is
Excellent, great. So when you look at the fact that $54 million was spent on this app, and as I outlined earlier, you look at the fact that various comparable apps that were prepared under the previous Conservative government were done for much lower costs, generally under $500,000, in one case going up to $3 million. We're talking orders of magnitude more money. Did you look at this contract and say, this isn't value for money? Or did you look at it and say, yep, sounds fine, stamp?
This is the magical
Mr.
question.
Chair, I think has been provided to this committee before. There's 46 different contracts that were used to produce the work related to.
Yeah, again, Mr. Mills,
But
sorry,
it's
can
not
we
a
answer the question
single
here?
contract for $54 million to build an
Yeah,
app.
can we answer the question? $54 million obviously sums up the work that was done on ArriveCan. So the question wasn't for sort of a regurgitation of process. You looked at the various contracts. Did you say, yeah, value for money looks good, or did you do what your job is supposed to be and ask some questions about this not achieving value for money?
At the beginning of the endeavor to build the ArriveCan app, we were not aware that there would be 46 contracts leveraged to actually undertake all the work necessarily internal to adjust systems, to actually design and to deploy the app on many platforms. So that analysis was not done at the beginning because we were not aware.
But at any point, so we established at the beginning that the minister was sort of incurious about this and unengaged from the process. Did at any point anyone in your department, in her office, herself, say, hey, we got a job to do, which is achieve value for money, not just put a rubber stamp on everything? Did anyone at any point say, this is not achieving value for money, guys?
Mr. Chair, I cannot speak for everyone in our department in terms of who was analyzing the overall value for money.
Did anyone at any point?
I'm afraid that is our time. Mr. Sousa, please.
All right, so clearly Genuis's line of attack there was impeaching the mandate of PSPC. So when it comes to government agencies, these agencies don't just exist. That's not their intent. The intent is actually a positive intent. So in order for a government agency to actually be created, there has to be an act that actually goes through Parliament to create that agency. And when that agency is created, there is a mandate to go with it. And you would say, well, of course, if we're going to be spending taxpayer money to create essentially a crown organization, then there should be a mandate, a demand on what that agency is supposed to do, so that we can then evaluate that agency against its mandate and say, yes, they're fulfilling that mandate, or no, they're not. And if they're not, then you can hold them to account, or you collapse the agency, or take any number of corrective actions. Or if you say, yes, they are fulfilling that mandate, then you applaud everybody, and then as an elected official, you can use that to celebrate success and say, look, Canadian taxpayers, this agency is actually giving value for money. Because that's really what this all comes down to, right, is money. So that's what Genuis is trying to go after these guys for. The Assistant Deputy Minister, again, he should have stayed home today. And he's unable to answer this question very well. Now, the whole business about ArriveCan and all of that coming down, 100% the minister would have been paying attention to this and saying, okay, so this is going to come back to me at some point. I better know what's going on. And even if they're not paying attention, the Assistant Deputy Minister the head of the organization, appointed, would be reaching out to them to let them know, hey, just so you know, this may or may not cross your desk. Here you go. So, absolutely, the minister would have been informed. And the fact that he's waffling on that, well, I have no knowledge. You have no knowledge about it. You're the ADM. You chose to come. Now, looking at something else that Mr. Mills said in another hearing, I'm going to quote him. There was a question from Mr. Johns. And it says, according to the article, there were referring to the Globe and Mail article on ArriveCan. According to the article, there were several companies that were contracted. Where are you going in terms of ensuring those subcontractors or employees are meeting the requirements? Mr. Mills' response, quote, certainly, we are looking at having the ability to make sure that we're capturing subcontracts. That's so that when we do large contracts that will necessarily involve subcontracting, we are creating positive incentives for them to follow some of our actions to make more opportunities available for diverse businesses and to make sure that they're not reimposing barriers that we've tried to remove through our normal contracting process. It's so that overall, the large contracts will also have greater representation of diverse suppliers within them, end quote. So basically what he's saying there is we are trying to remove oversight from our contracting process, and the whole concept of subcontractors allows them to do that. So it makes it easier for these private organizations to operate without oversight. We don't want to get in their way. Well, hello, when it comes to taxpayer money, you damn right we want oversight. It's our money. We want to know where it's going. And if these stupid organizations are skimming off the top and passing this out to their buddies, we want visibility on that. Again, if you haven't seen our video this morning, we show that the current president of Caratics, Christian Firth from GC Strategies, his partner, Darren Anthony, and another guy, they all worked at the same staffing firm before they got into this mess. Now, the thing is they're all acting like they don't know each other. Well, of course you knew each other. You worked in the same organization for a couple of years. So, these guys are passing contracts back and forth, and the government of Canada is none the wiser. And according to Mr. Mills, this testimony that I just wrote, he encourages that.
I wonder if he remembers. This testimony was from last year. It was last November the 14th of 2022. So I wonder if he remembers saying this, and I wonder if it's going to come back to bite him.
Right. All right, Mr. Sousa, let's go, Godfather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be sharing my time with my colleague, Mr. Kaczynski, as well. A couple of things, Eric. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
We knew who you're talking.
I'm pretty much new to the board. I need to pay. My apologies. A couple of questions very quickly here. Do you think Phoenix was good value for money?
Phoenix? Oh my God.
Do we know what Phoenix is?
Yes, we do know what Phoenix is. Phoenix, oh my goodness. Phoenix is the government payroll system. And I'm guessing they're going to try and tie us to the Harper government. And let's see what they say.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I cannot.
That's okay. I don't think none of us do as well. And then that was obviously a big piece. I think that went through badly. The Botler contract was a fixed rate contract. Is that correct? I think it was at $350,000 or something like that. Do you know, Mr. Chan?
Okay, so that probably went over everybody's head. So Phoenix is the government payroll system. And from all accounts, it is terrible. It is absolutely atrocious. So I would agree, based on what I've heard, It's a terrible system. And if you built something terrible, you should own it. Acknowledge it. Move on. So the difference is there's not a bunch of criminality attached to the Phoenix project. There's a lot of criminality attached to the ArriveCan project and all of these other projects. So that's what we call a false equivalency, everybody.
Yeah.
You're speaking to, thank you for the question. You're speaking about the task authorization, which
Yeah.
is not a contract.
It was not a contract, but was,
It was part.
but
it
was
be-
was the prime contractor fixed?
the per diem rates were fixed.
Okay. Mr. Mills, how many contracts are you dealing with annually?
We do 10,000 contractual activities a year.
How many of those contracts is the minister aware of?
Oh my God, really?
In the tens, probably less than 100 that would require
Yeah.
ministerial approval.
They're not, that minister normally would not be part of the decision-making process, correct?
That is correct. In the case of ArriveCan, of the 40 or the 31
He's
contracts
trying
that we
hard
put in place,
to disconnect
there
the
was only
minister.
3 of them, I believe, that actually required executive approval. The rest were within the actual hands of this.
And when we look at contracts, and this is a service contract that's being provided for IT professionals that are not available to us in the bureaucracy and in the public service.
Yes,
I'm
they
very
are.
interested and curious as to why the members opposite now want to inflate the bureaucracy with many more people and put them on the payroll when they want small government. But when you look at a contract, when you have dealings for construction, for example, you got building contractors, right? You got the trades, you got the sub-trades, you got a project manager, you got a construction manager, none of whom are employed by government, but you do provide contract bases enabling them to work. And everyone's making cuts in between, including those that are working union paid jobs to provide those services. Is this similar in this case?
Mr. Chair, I would say it's very, very parallel. It's in the case that these IT projects generally are to build a system or a tool and then leave it behind. So it'd be very similar to engaging an architect and an engineering firm to design a building, then engaging a prime contractor to actually build that building.
Time out. I disagree. I completely disagree with that assessment. If you... All right. So the comparison that they're trying to make is they're trying to say, well, this is just like a construction company. And if you want to build an office building, then you're not just going to hire one company, and there's going to be subcontractors and subcontractors. Yes, there is. 100%. Because a plumber who goes and gets their license, and if they don't have an electrician's license, they can't do electrical work, can they? If you're not certified as a crane operator, you're not going to be allowed to operate a crane, are you? No. So in that case, there are specific regulations, and there's definitely people out in the chat that know more about this than I do, certainly, there's, especially in the trades, there's certain things that you must have in order to actually be certified to perform your work. So that's not the case in IT. In IT, you may have guys that know a lot about certain disciplines, but they don't have to be certified to do the work. And in far more cases, you have IT firms that have a bench of people that would be brought in to do the work. If you're building an app, you're going to go to a firm that specializes in app building. I don't know, and maybe I'm just ignorant. Are you going to go to a construction organization that only builds houses? That only builds garages? I don't think so. That's different. And it's a completely different model. Now, if we were to follow their example, then you would hire a firm that would then, to build a building, and they say, sure, we're going to build that building. And then they subcontract out the finding of all of those plumbers and electricians and everything else to another company. But they take a cut off the top. And then another company takes on that task of finding all of these people. And then they find all of these people. And then pay them. The model is still corrupt because that first company isn't doing any work. All they've done is subcontracted to somebody else.
Well, it's like Genio said a few committees ago, actually. He's like, so if Stephanie pays me $100 to paint her fence, and I just turn around and hire Larry to paint that same fence for $50, what have I really done? I've gotten $50, but what have I really done?
Right. And to Clyde's point, are those contractors normally two-person companies that have inroads with the government officials and take 30% to hire unqualified people? Well, that's the magic question, right? And if they're not qualified, well, we'll sure alter their resumes to make sure they're qualified. Diane Sylvain with a $28 super chat. Thank you so much. Quote, value for money, end quote. The mafia talking point. I love you both, Cypher and Fox. God bless. I have a lot of experience in federal government. If you ever need help, let me know. I was a Crown prosecutor and a manager.
No
Fox
way.
Overcast.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So you must be sitting back and smiling at a kindred spirit in Larry Brock there, Diane. That's great.
And Fox, I love cats too. Awesome. They are awesome.
Flip us an email, Diane. We may take you up on your offer later. If Fox wants to drop our email or Barnaby, drop our email in the chat. That'd be great. Okay, let's continue on with this train wreck.
Okay, over to you.
I want to thank my colleague MP Susinski for his excellent line of questioning here. Mr. Mills, the Botler AI contract is a series of 6 contracts, deliverables about $70,000 a piece. You mentioned that PSPC looks after about 10,000 contracts per year. Where does it rank a contract like that of that amount, $70,000 in the grand scheme of things, relative to the number of contracts that you see?
It's not.
Is it a big project, small project?
That would be a relatively small project for us. We have multi-billion-dollar contracts, so this would be a very small task authorization.
Okay, gotcha. Mr. Ergen, you've been working in the public sector for close to 30 years, you said.
30 years.
26?
36
years.
30 years. That's right.
Have you come across a situation where, for example, a company has inflated their bona fides? Like on the CV, like we've heard with Botler AI, with GC Strategies. Have you come across misconduct like that?
So thank you for your question. So normally, as was already outlined, is that normally at the point of a resource evaluation, if you will, that is a client responsibility. If it's at the TA stage, and then even at the RFP stage, the client is responsible for evaluation, the technical evaluation.
But have you come across, in your experience, 30 plus years, have you come across misconduct when you're reviewing sort of contracts? And if you did, do you feel like you have the training and that you have the support from the department in order to be able to flag it and address it?
So I've never come across an instance where, in this case, allegations were made that inflation of experience or resumes was done. So I personally have never had a situation.
Any other misconduct?
That is our time, Mr.
Thank you.
Kuzmierczak. Mr. Kuzmierczak. Witnesses, thanks for being with us. Mr. Mills, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things. My colleague, Mr. Brock, asked a question regarding the bonus. You were going to, I assume you'll just write back to us an answer, and I think I know the response, but you respond to us. The NDA, will you just provide it? You mentioned you weren't sure you had it. Would you just simply provide it to us if you have it? Perfect. Thanks very much.
Good luck getting it. All right. Well, we've come to the end of the stream, or rather the video portion. So that was interesting to get into the weeds with public service procurement. And as expected, a lot of waffling, a lot of really back and forth of trying to say, we do all of this stuff to get value, and then when you actually ask them, well, what do you do? Oh, that's not us, that's somebody else. And unfortunately, that's basically how it works. So it's extremely frustrating. And I want to touch on something that Mills said at the end, and I think it is very insulting. Because Kuzmirchuk asked him, so, in the grand scheme of things, how large is the Botler contract? He said, individual deliverables are 70,000 up to 420,000. And he said, oh, well, this is very small. This is very small. We usually deal with multi-million-dollar contracts. While that may be the case, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure everybody on this stream and everybody you talk to in your day-to-day life would not think that $420,000 is a small amount of money. And I don't care if it's $420,000, $420, or $4.20. These people need to be paying a lot more respect to the money that is actually being spent by this government, because it's not their money. And the problem is they spend it like it is. If it was their money, by all means, you want to spend $54 million on something, fill your boots. But that's not your money. That's the money of the cashier that works at Starbucks. It's the money of the project manager that works for a construction company. It's the money of a crown prosecutor. It's taxpayer money by somebody that works in every single demographic in this country, and it deserves the respect of the work that it took to actually earn that and then pay it to the government. And this is what I can't tolerate from these people. Because there's no regard of where that money came from, and they sign off on it like it's nothing. So it was a frustrating stream to listen to, but it's also really important to listen to. And I know some people on our regular videos, some of them will say, oh, I can't listen to Trudeau anymore, or I can't listen to this person anymore. And I get it, because it's very frustrating to listen to some of these liberals talk. But I encourage you to grit your teeth and listen. It is so important to hear what they are saying. Because you need to know. You need to know what they're saying when you go out and have these conversations with liberal voters that may be in your family, that may be in your workplace, that may be in your circle of friends. Because you need to know what's going to be coming back at you. And we try to arm you with the data and the arguments in order to have those conversations to change people's minds so that when election does come, we can get out of this mess. And it's going to take years for the governments to get out of this mess.
Well, and Canada wasn't like this before Justin Trudeau got here. And it's going to take a little bit of time. But, if we all band together as Canadians and we work hard, we can fix it. We can fix this mess that he's created.
So it's going to take a while. It's going to take some patience. And the whole way, the NDP and the Liberals are going to be telling them and telling everybody what a terrible job they're doing. And then all of a sudden, all the problems that they created are going to be the Conservatives' fault. You just wait. But anyhow, we're still following this. We can't wait until Min Doan comes back, the former CIO of the CBSA. That's going to be a great one. Christian Firth, when he returns, that's going to be a great one. Darren Anthony, we're still waiting for him to come. He's Christian Firth's partner. And they're just warming up. And as soon as they get a minister tied to this, guaranteed they're going to be summoning a minister in here as well. So anyway, it's 12:52 our time. Thank you everyone for joining us on the stream and sticking around for almost 4 hours.
I saw someone in the chat ask when the next live stream is. So we're going to have our regular Sunday live stream this coming Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And that'll be, just regular live stream. I think we're just going to kind of do like a Q&A. We can talk about whatever we feel like. And then we'll do the Discord after. And then I'm not sure when the next committee is. I don't know if we have a schedule for that yet.
So OGO always meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
But is it anybody interesting coming this Tuesday? That's the question.
Well, keep talking, Fox,
Okay.
and I'll find that out.
I'll keep talking.
You're not talking?
I'm not talking. No, sorry, guys. I'm not sure what to talk about. I'm very shy when I get put on the spot. I know a few of you were saying you could hear our cats in the background. They're getting a little grumpy because they're hungry.
Yeah, so they don't have the agendas finalized yet. You can actually go on ourcommons.ca, and then you'll see committees and then meetings in there, and you can actually click in there to see. But they don't post them until they've actually finalized who the witnesses are and the agenda of the meeting itself. But as soon as we know, we will put out a notification. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so you get that notification. And stay tuned, because over the next day or so, we are going to be releasing our second evidence drop from Botler. And we're going to be commenting on that. We did leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger with Antonio Utano and what his response was. And we're going to be continuing on from that. So we thank Botler for all the information that they provided. And don't forget to follow their Twitter feed as well, because they're dropping evidence in real time as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And we'll see you in the comments. Check out our playlist on this to keep you up to date and fully informed. And Clyde, make sure you're feeling better. Want to hear a nice clear voice on tomorrow's live stream, buddy. So thank you, everybody. You guys have a good night.
Good night, everyone.